This story is about how a powerful cultivator came into the world and decided to start cultivation anew in order to fulfill his long-standing desire. Let's go. The magical kingdom was overcrowded, and new participants were not accepted at all. The guy with the sword stood looking at the sky with flickering lightning. There was fire and lava around him. A tribulation practitioner, Baishu trained hard for 300 years to ascend to immortality. The boy decided that no one would stop him today. But the enemy called him an impudent man and stretched out his hands towards him. Baishu exclaimed that if a god prevented him, he would kill the gods too. The boy was serious and began to approach the menacing, angry god. A scream was heard during the battle between the two strongest opponents. Baishu was confident that the heavens would not stop him and rushed to God, directing all his strength and power against him. Screaming, he approached his opponent and without fear began to use his abilities. Lava and fire flickered around and the boy flew up in the air and waved his sharp, strong sword. Baishu began to approach the designated target, and his gaze was purposeful and burned with fire. The boy approached the fire and greeted the magical kingdom, spreading his arms to the sides. Meanwhile, the two boys mocked the third, and said that he dared to steal their brother Hu's woman. Did this toad really want to try swan meat? Li Jian sat on the ground, pressed against the wall. Is this really a magical kingdom? One of the guys asked just to look at himself. It's unlikely they'll let him go. He asked if the boy was mute, and he began to approach him, clenching his powerful fist. Li Jian thought that there was no fluctuation of spiritual energy in his body, which meant that this was definitely not a magical realm. When the enemy approached him, he grabbed his fist with his palm and asked if he was finished. The man did not expect such a turn of events, and wondered how he could suddenly become so strong. Li Jian rose from the ground and began using techniques against his opponents. One of the guys asked how dare he resist and promised to teach him a lesson. The boy found it a little strange that he couldn't use spiritual power. The man then clenched his fist and asked him to recognize the true power of the superpower. Li Jian could not understand what he was talking about and simply expected another attack. But before the man could approach him with a blow, the boy very deftly dodged and ended up behind him. He said that he might have lost his spiritual power, but with such a low level of ability, he definitely couldn't defeat him. Li Jian clenched his fist and ahead of his opponent by several steps punched him in the stomach with all his might. He was very strong, and the guy flew far back from the blow, hitting his back on the floor. The boy jumped in the air and began to strike another blow to the second man's head. He dealt with his opponents and they fell to their knees before him. One of them said that they were wrong and asked not to touch them. Li Jian told them to get lost immediately. One of the men wanted to quickly tell the boss that this scoundrel may have awakened superpowers. The boy looked after the fleeing opponents and thought that he was Li Jian. His gaze darted forward and beads of sweat ran down his cheeks. He was very sorry. He lost his parents at such a young age. The owner of this body is called Li Jian. As a child, he lost his parents and was adopted by his mother's friend Liu Iran. The guys mocked him. As a result of his demobilization at a young age, he developed a disease called autism. Because of this, he became the subject of ridicule. The boy thought that it seemed that deliberate cutting of the sky did not help him rise, but on the contrary, forced him to turn into a mortal and end up in this strange world. And the power that guy used is called a superpower, and most people in this world awaken it in themselves. But the owner of this body is an exception, and he doesn't know whether the true owner can cultivate immortality using the body. A girl stood in front of him and clenching her fists, she asked why they were mocking him again. The girl's name was GCI. She walked up to Li Jian and explained that if he couldn't fight, he should just run away, otherwise he would get hurt. GCI was the daughter of Li Jiang's adoptive mother and helped him every time he was bullied. And those two mocked him because the boy was close to her. The girl said that her mother would be worried if she found out about this. From the owner's memories, it seems that every time Li Jian was injured, GCI used superpowers to heal him. It turns out that superpowers also have their own attributes. The girl said that the good thing was that this time he wasn't hit too hard. Otherwise, with her superpowers, she would definitely have had to go to the hospital for some time. Li Jian clenched his fist and wondered if the superpowers in this world could be magic in his understanding. GCI came closer to him and gave a click. The boy stared at one point. The girl approached him and looking into his eyes asked why he was silent. Li Jian looked into her eyes and asked how ordinary mortals could hurt him. The girl decided that autism had become schizophrenia. The boy noticed that she was looking down on him, but she asked the boy to forget and go home quickly. She grabbed his arm and pulled him forward. GCI explained to her friend and childhood comrade that they needed to go faster because their mother was waiting for them. This world is completely different from his previous one, with endless tall buildings built in a row. There is also a vehicle called a car that can easily travel hundreds of miles. And all people of different ages dress poorly, exposing their skin, although this violates etiquette. It seems to be liberation from yet another shackles of his past world. and superpowers are the power that dominates this world. And he doesn't know the aura of this world and whether cultivators will be influenced by superpowers. There is indeed a difficult path ahead and awareness of another world, but even if it is difficult, he will still achieve his long-standing desire for ascension. In front of us is the Eastern Street, District A08. The day was very bright and clear. GCI brought the boy into the room and exclaimed that they were finally home. But when the guys went inside the room, the man appeared in front of them and asked why he was here. The girl was very scared. Li Jian tried to figure out who could have scared her so much. He stared with his eyes at the legs that appeared outside the threshold of this room. It was the father of the girl, Ji Chengtian. He approached his daughter and greeted her. GCI clenched her fist and approached her father and asked what he had forgotten here. Ji Chengtian replied that he just came to talk to his mother about something. Suddenly his mother called him. The girl's mother's name was Liu Iran. She approached the man and clenched her fists and asked him to get out of here. The man noticed that she was not happy to see him. He extended his hand to the girl, but she asked not to touch her. The father asked not to worry because Daddy would come to her in a few days. He raised his head up and proudly walked towards the door. Ji Chengtian said as he left that she still couldn't get away from him. Li Jian thought that Ji Chengtian, Ji Qi's father, had an affair with his wife, so they reconciled and the girl did too. But he strongly interfered and controlled the lives of his wife and her daughter. However, there is no information about this in Li Jian's memory. However, the appearance of this freak does not bode well, so much so that he is afraid that there will be a lot of trouble in the future, so it is worth cultivating as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, evening had already come and the street quickly became dark. The streetlights were on full blast. Li Jian walked along the road and, covering his eyes with his hand, could not understand what was happening in this world. He would like to know more about this world, but first you need to practice. He hopes that the true owner of the body will be able to cultivate immortality with his spiritual essence. The boy sat in the lotus position and closed his eyes, introducing qi into the body and nourishing the human spirit with the spirit of heaven. Li Jian thought that the ancient spirit was a technique created by him in his past life. She can condense absorbed spiritual energy to make her sphere more durable, and she becomes more crushing when faced with immortal cultivators of the same realm. Is the aura of this world really that thin? The boy was in the spiritual realm, and thought that even with the help of ancient spiritual energy, it could only condense 3 spiritual forces. Qi penetrates the muscles and veins, strengthens the will, supports nature, and strengthens the spirit. To achieve immortality, you need to persist no matter how difficult it is. Could this feeling be that rare body that is the inherent body of the Tao? The spiritual energy is so subtle that he can practice it in the blink of an eye, but he has still reached the 5th level of qi refining. Suddenly, he heard a cry for help. A girl fell face down on the ground. One of the villains told the girl that she had nowhere else to run and asked her to play with her brother. The girl began to defend herself and asked not to approach. She tried to defend herself, but she couldn't do anything and began to call for help with a cry for salvation. When Li Jian came to the rescue, the guy who threatened the girl asked her to go about her business and mind her own business. The boy looked into his eyes and said that it turns out there are enough scoundrels everywhere. The enemy got angry and exclaimed that he had asked for it. He began to approach him to strike. The guy added, looking at him, that today he will learn the power of the 2nd level ability. Li Jian thought that he had a thunder attribute, and it was time to try the results of today's cultivation. The boy moved his eyebrows to his nose and cast a contemptuous glance at his opponent. The man was very surprised that his thunder and lightning did not hurt the boy. He asked if he really had superpowers beyond him. Li Jian replied that only short-sighted imbeciles would focus on the so-called levels. Then the guy started screaming and asking his brother to discuss everything. But the boy did not listen to him and dealt him a crushing blow. The opponent was already lying on the ground, foaming at the mouth, and Li Jian told him that he would not get rid of his superpower. He heard a sound next to him and perked up his ears. The boy glanced to the side. The girl he saved came up to him and hugged him. He turned sharply in her direction. The girl told her brother that he smelled nice. Li Jian thought that her blood circulation was too strong and that someone had probably drugged her. The boy twisted her hand, and approaching, asked her to excuse him in advance. He began to use his superpowers to remove the poison from her body. Li Jian began to use acupuncture and hit special points for a speedy cure. The girl exclaimed that this was very cool. She was weak and the boy picked her up. Li Jian thought that the drug had dissolved, so after a cup of tea she should wake up. Suddenly, an unknown guy approached him and, clenching his fists, asked the scoundrel to get away from his sister. This was Gu Tianju, 3rd level ability. He approached the boy to strike. Li Jian gave him a disdainful look and noticed another superpower he had. Gu Tianju began to approach his opponent and clenched his fist and exclaimed that he would kill him. Then the boy threw the girl back on the bench and prepared to repel the attack. Gu Tianju approached him and tried to strike him, but the boy dodged and exclaimed that he was too slow. Although his cultivation level is not higher than the 5th level of qi refinement, He does not need any magic. He doesn't need magical abilities to deal with them with low levels of superpowers. And this will be quite enough. Li Jian approached his opponent and raised his leg above his head. Gu Tianju noticed that the boy was too fast, and he could not parry his blows at all. He wondered if he was from a higher academy. Li Jian approached the enemy lying on the ground and asked if he had just said that he wanted to kill him. The guy lying on the ground answered, gritting his teeth, that he could humiliate him as much as he wanted. But he asked only not to touch his sister and clenched his fist again, trying to protect the girl. Li Jian decided that this guy wanted to do some kind of trick and gave him a questioning look. The enemy actually tried to strike, but the boy dodged it in time. Gu Tianju exclaimed that he might not have mastered this technique yet, but he was strong enough to handle it. He began to use a flash of flame. The boy thought that the barrier field inherent in the Tao body could weaken all blows in a certain range. So, what is the level of the flame and will not come close to it? Gu Tianju noticed that his flames do not take him, which means his superpower is the element of earth. But he doesn't seem to have any superpowers at all. The guy asked who he was. Li Jian replied that he would rather think about himself. The blood boils, but the heart can't stand it. The boy looked at his opponent and told him that he was going to blow himself up. His blood really boiled, and the guy glowed with a bright yellow flame. Everyone came out of him. Gu Tianju fell to one knee and placed his hand on the ground. He began to breathe heavily and sigh. The guy asked what he wanted to do again. Li Jian grabbed his shoulder with his hand. He clenched his other hand in a certain motion and approached Gu Tianju. He began to use his acupuncture abilities and the guy groaned heavily. Li Jian stepped back a little and crossed his arms over his chest and asked how he was feeling now. Gu Tianju was very surprised and asked if he was saving him now. He was breathing heavily, and beads of sweat were streaming down his face. Li Jian explained to the guy that he simply understood everything wrong. He wanted to protect his sister and had no intention of killing him. Meanwhile, the sister had already come to her senses and, opening her eyes, looked at her brother. She asked her brother what he was doing here. Li Jian noticed that the girl had woken up. She approached the boy and thanked him for saving her. Gu Tianju asked his sister if this guy saved her. The girl explained that she drank drugs in a bar and some man pestered her. And this young man helped her. Then the brother scratched the back of his head and said, apologizing that he was a little mistaken. Li Jian replied that since all the misunderstandings were resolved, he would go. But suddenly some men appeared in front of them. One of them laughed and said that since it was a misunderstanding, it was necessary to simply discuss it. Then the boy turned his head towards the man and asked who he was. An old man in a wheelchair with a gray beard explained that he was their grandfather Gu Wen. If it weren't for the help of their little friend, his dear grandson would have exploded right now. The old man asked if he could invite him to his modest home and repay him for his help. Li Jian began to leave and said that there was no need to do this. Gu Wen said that although the old man is a researcher of superpowers, he is also well aware of the secrets of ancient monuments. Their little friend had just suppressed Gu Tianju's superpowers with his bare hands. His abilities are incredibly high, and his physical strength is similar to what he read about in books. He wondered where he learned this. Li Jian thought that there was absolutely no spiritual power fluctuation around this old man, and he was also sick, but it seems he can sense changes in his spiritual power, and he is far from easy. The boy told his grandfather that it didn't matter and headed away from them. Gu Tianju asked his grandfather who he was. He said that his body and strength were quite unusual. My sister exclaimed that even though it was strange, she thought he was still cute. He stopped his brother's self-destruction so easily, and maybe he can cure his grandfather's leg problem. Gu Wen said that he would not let anyone talk about what happened and asked Gu Tianju to get information about him. The old man definitely wanted to find this guy. Perhaps he's truly legendary. Then his Gu family will prosper. Meanwhile, Li Jian was already at home near his aunt and sister. Aunt Liu explained to the boy that school starts today and she prepared him a new uniform. Li Jian immediately thanked her aunt. GCI asked him what this sudden politeness was all about. She thought he was somehow strange today. The girl explained that her mother specially selected this uniform for him and 3 months' salary was spent on it. Mom never even bought her such expensive things. Li Jian thought that the Liu family did not live well, but they could spend 3 months' salary to buy a new suit. It looks like Li Jian is truly a full-fledged member of the family. Aunt said that who would say it's not her who constantly buys all sorts of garbage. GCI asked her brother to quickly try on the uniform and show himself to them. The boy noticed that they treat him very well and he must take upon himself the protection of this family. Yajun University, an international aristocratic college with top-notch faculty and rich or noble students, where most of the teachers and students have superpowers. One of the girls told the other that she hadn't paid any attention to anything before, that there was a weirdo from a parallel class. Nothing like that. GCI said that a person relies on clothes, and a horse relies on a saddle. He looks much nicer in his new clothes. One of the guys asked if this guy was narrow-minded. If he hadn't said it, he wouldn't have noticed it. He asked if this was their school beauty, GCI. Li Jian thought that the original Li Jian had no power at all. But thanks to GC's help, he had the opportunity to attend college and even become an auditor. But he never thought that because of his illness, he would become an object of ridicule for those strong children. Just one of the guys asked if their fool was here. The girl grabbed the boy by the hand and asked him to leave and not run into them. The enemy's name was Chen Hu. He asked not to think that if he dressed up normally, they would treat him like a normal person. The boy thought that Chen Hu was quite a rich and influential person in this school. Due to his unsuccessful attempts to get close to GCI, he often pestered the real Li Jian for being close to her. Chen Hu grabbed Li Jian by the arms and approached him, exclaiming that it was time to settle the score. The girl asked not to do this, and the boy cast a contemptuous glance at his opponent and asked him to take his dirty hands off him. He grabbed his hand and said that he told him to remove his hand. The boy performed a trick by twisting his wrist. Chen Hu began to scream in pain and scream what he had done to his hand. One of the guys said that life is not at all expensive for this idiot. How dare he touch their brother Hu? He has level 5 abilities, so now there will be a show. The opponents could not understand why Li Jian became so strong, and the boy thought about the abilities of the 5th level. The cultivation system is divided into 8 levels. The initial level of abilities is divided into 9 levels, the rest into 3 stages: high, medium, and low. The ruler is the incomparable god of war, murder, death, triumph, immortality. The threshold is harmony, dispensing justice, returning to absolute emptiness. The holder of absolute power is deification, conqueror for the birth of the soul, challenger in creating the manipulator of the base of Ki, the ability to purify Ki. The abilities of the 5th level are equivalent to the 5th level of Ki refinement cultivation. Chen Hu asked why this paralytic suddenly became so strong. His comrade answered him that perhaps this fool had awakened his abilities, and he had beaten them well last time. The guy thought that the fool who awakened his abilities was still a fool and went at him with his fists. Chen Hu exclaimed that if he dared to joke with him, he would kill him. GCI covered Li Jian with her body. She stood up behind him and asked what they allowed themselves to do while at the university. Brother Hu's father is one of the managers of the university, so he himself is in charge. When the opponent's fist flew towards the girl, Li Jian grabbed her by the waist and pulled her away from him. He hugged the girl to himself, protecting her from the attack of these evil, nasty guys. Li Jian began to use his abilities and dodge their blows. GCI couldn't understand where it came from so much power. Perhaps Chen Hu is right and Li Jian truly awakened his superpowers. The enemy exclaimed that he had just awakened the crystalline energy yesterday, so now he would paint his face. But the boy very deftly dodged the blow and struck him in the chest with his hand. There was an enemy behind him. He didn't expect it, but he felt it in his gut. He found this method interesting since it uses the wind to move, and the method is similar to the basic wind control skill. But he was sorry that this use was only superficial, and he was already ahead of the enemy. Li Jian did a spin in the air and sent the enemy straight to the ground. Then their leader decided to deal with this guy himself and called his comrades 2 morons. He said that it was better to do everything himself and began to approach Li Jian, clenching his fist. He decided to use Shining Punch. As a young master of Wanjin, he has already awakened superpowers in himself since childhood. And now he can use a radiant strike with powers far superior to strikes of the same level. Fighting a brainless person like him who just awakened the power is as easy as crushing an ant. This is what Li Jian thought about his opponent. He stood before him imperturbably. Chen Hu's fist was already approaching him, but the boy stopped his blow with only one finger. He couldn't understand how he did it. Why did this idiot's aura suddenly become so strong? The guy began to fall to the ground with his back down. He covered himself with his hand and exclaimed that this was simply impossible. Only level 6 abilities can stop his radiant strike. But he just awakened his powers. The boy replied that this was his experience, and I thought that his level 5 superpowers were quite disappointing. He promised to protect this family, and creatures like him should know their place. The boy began to approach his opponent. He was very scared, and covering himself with his hand, asked what he wanted to do because he knew who he was. Li Jian clenched his fist and asked him to listen carefully. From that day on, he asks him to watch his words and actions. The boy brushed him off again, and the enemy began shouting throughout the street. The guys said that Brother Hu got hurt from such a fool, and it's just a shame. Chen Hu walked around threateningly all day and was finally taught a lesson. Another guy asked if Li Jian was serious and when did he change so dramatically. The man asked him to be silent because this fool today, by the way, is still handsome. The girl ran up to the boy and said that he really got his superpowers. GCI looked into the boy's eyes and exclaimed that she was very glad that now he could fight back against his opponents and offenders. And the girl came up to the boy as close as possible and pressed herself close to him and kissed him on the cheek. Meanwhile, in one cafe, girls were dancing near poles to loud music. One of the guys held a cigarette in his hands and asked his man how they could get it from a fool. The man continued to smoke his pipe and, exhaling smoke, exclaimed that it was just a pity. The gentleman's name was Chen Xiao. He asked if Chen Hu failed, then what is the point of losers like them? The man pulled the cigarette towards the guy and began to put it out on his head. The boy asked to spare him. But the man continued to do this, and the boy had a cigarette burn on his forehead. Chen Xiao said that his son was the only one who could hold someone back. However, now they have humiliated him, so he must go and find out what is happening. The ideologist of superpowers, Ren Wukong, bowed to his master and asked him to leave the young master's problem to him. Chen Xiao asked him not to overwork himself. He explained that he allowed him to personally experience the consequences of Wan Jin's provocation. GCI took Li Jian's arm and said that although Chen Hu deserves punishment, he is too cruel. His family is quite powerful. What if he gets into trouble? Li Jian thought that the place called the university contained much more spiritual energy than other places. With the double blessing of the ancient spirit and the true Tao body, he was able to reach the 7th level of Qi refinement in less than a month. And if he focused on this, he could easily reach the 9th level of Qi purification. GCI asked the boy why he froze and whether he was listening to her at all. Li Jian replied that he was listening and said that this is a cool place. The girl looked at him with interest. She thought that this was the end, and his condition was getting worse and worse. Suddenly, Li Jian covered the girl with his hand, moving her away from danger. She couldn't understand what was happening, but some force flew in their direction. The boy began to defend himself, and a light turquoise haze enveloped all the people around like an ominous veil. Some screamed for help, others simply ran away. People rushed in all directions. The girl asked what happened. Li Jian held her close to him, protecting her from danger. GCI said that he had a wound on his face, but the boy replied that he was fine. He thought that dispersing spiritual energy to protect others allowed this attack to break through the true Tao body. Li Jian saw an enemy in front of him who was approaching them and covered the girl with himself. The guy stood in front of him and kept his hands in his pockets. He said that he was very interested. A man with newly awakened superpowers was able to repel his attack. Li Jian asked who he was from. GCI asked the boy not to waste time on Ren Wukong because he is also a manipulator and asked him to run away. Li Jian decided that with an aura comparable to the 9th level of Qi refinement, he had finally found a worthy opponent. Ren Wukong asked if he was pretending to be like this or if he was actually a fool. He asked him to think carefully about whether he had touched anything that should not have been touched. Although the gentleman asked him to be more careful, he definitely does not intend to hold back. The enemy directed all his abilities against the boy, and it was as if he was bound by a force in the form of a purple light veil. GCI noticed that his hands were shackled and began to worry about him. Li Jian decided that this technique was familiar to him. Ren Wukong threw the boy with his back to the ground and his hands continued to be in chains. Meanwhile, Li Jian's outlook changed and he could not understand how to confront the enemy. The guy began to approach him and use all his abilities to attack. Stones began to fly around. The girl was very scared for her friend and exclaimed that he had killed him. Ren Wukong asked her not to scream. He explained that although the master did not need her, he would not mind feeling more blood on his hands. As he approached the girl, some noise reached his ear. The guy glanced to the side. Li Jian was already approaching him, breaking the stones around him. He held a weapon in his hands and was already close. When the boy was nearby, he found his opponent's handwriting very interesting. The enemy was simply shocked that Li Jian was alive and could not understand how this was even possible. The guy asked what kind of abilities he had awakened and began to use his power. Li Jian closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they glowed with a bright yellow light. An ominous purple light emanated from the enemy and rose upward in the form of 2 bone hands. There were students in the Tiantong group who used these techniques. They spread out under the sky and attacked with the power of Qi. They were considered strong back then. The boy told his opponent that if he used his old tricks again, he could not harm him. Rising upward, Li Jian began to approach Ren Wukong, and on the way, broke his 2 bone hands shrouded in purple haze. The guy was simply shocked and exclaimed that this was impossible. He asked how he defeated his shadowless one. He did not expect that the boy would break his 2 bone hands, which flew into the air trying to harm him. He clenched his fists and glowed with a bright crimson haze. Ren Wukong asked the boy to attack him again. He put his hands up. Li Jian began to approach faster and faster towards his opponent without letting go of the weapon. The boy decided to use the Lin Yue sword technique, 4 types. The stones around began to scatter, falling down with a roar. Ren Wukong raised his head up and, covered in drops of sweat, was simply shocked by what was happening. Li Jian completely glowed with golden light and his sword glowed as if it were gold. The boy approached his opponent and dealt him a strong blow, and he began to fall to the ground screaming. He thought that he had been defeated by an idiot who had just awakened his powers. Li Jian told the opponent that he had good skills, but did not know how to develop his body. This is the reason for his loss. The enemy was already lying on the cold, hard asphalt, and a trickle of blood was flowing from his mouth. Li Jian did not let go of his weapon and closed his eyes and thought about something of his own. He decided that this world was not like the world of immortality that he knew before. GCI ran up to the boy and asked how he was. She noticed that he was also having fun, but he scared her to death. Li Jian replied that such weaklings could not hurt him. Ren Wukong growled that this was not the end. If he offends Wan Jin, the master will definitely make their lives hell. GCI, scared, asked the boy if they would provoke any influential people. Li Jian asked her what kind of gang this Wan Jin was. While they were talking, a guy they knew approached them and wanted to see who dared to touch his Gu family. When Ren Wukong saw Gu Tianju in front of him, he was very surprised and streams of sweat began to flow down his face. The guys began to approach Li Jian. Little sister Gu Tianju rushed into his arms and called him her hero who made him look for him so well. She ran up to the boy and began to hug him. GCI looked at them from the side, twisting her face. The girl told her hero that he always smells very nice. Li Jian remembered that these were the brother and sister he saved that time, but he couldn't understand what they were doing here. GCI asked the boy who she was. The girl greeted her little sister and said that she was Gu Tianren, a friend of this hero. Then the girl asked the boy why she didn't know about this cute girlfriend of his. Li Jian closed his eyes and told GC that he did not know them. The boy asked the girl to leave him alone, but Gu Tianren asked her hero not to do that. Gu Tianju took his little sister by the shoulders and told her to come to him and stop pestering the master. The guy joked in front of Li Jian and said that he was naive and uneducated, so he hoped he didn't mind. The Gu family is very famous. Its influence extends to many areas, including military, economic, political, and scientific. They are unmatched in Kangqing City. Even the local inspector in charge of the law must coordinate with the Gu family. Wen Jin is no match for them. The guy was surprised how the Gu family, who manages everything, seriously respects Li Jian. But Li Jian acted so dismissively as if he didn't care about the Gu family at all. This simply cannot be. The boy turned to his opponent and asked why he had not calmed down yet or still wanted to fight. But the guy asked Mr. Li to spare him. He explained that he did not do all this intentionally. It was all because of Chen Xiao, who ordered him to do this, and he again asked him to forgive him. Li Jian thought that Chen Xiao is Chen Hu's father. He did not expect that their personal disputes would reach the point of using the power of his family. Previously, Chen Xiao was just a dog raised by Uncle Li Yan, and after leaving the Gu family, in order to earn money, he decided to gather some kind of gang. Why should he even believe him? Gu Tianju asked the gentleman to provide it to him. It's time to learn from your mistakes regarding the dear guest of their family. Li Jian said that if the guy dares to harass him or GCE in the future, then he should be prepared to answer for it. The girl approached her brother and asked him what was actually happening. Are they really from that powerful Gu family? Li Jian replied that it was probably so. Gu Tianju approached the boy and said that they came about the situation, and he would like to invite him to Gu's house to express their gratitude. Li Jian turned his head towards the guy and replied that there was no need to do this. The Gu family is so powerful that he might not have done anything that day. Nothing would have happened to Gu Tianren anyway. The guy next asked the gentleman to think about his proposal. The master's sister approached her hero and asked him to go with them. She was worried that grandfather would swear. Then the boy chuckled and pulled the girl towards him and looked straight into her eyes. Li Jian noticed that although her breathing was very weak, it was quite obvious. Gu Tianren called the boy her hero and asked what he wanted to do. Li Jian began to approach her faster and closer, and touched her jacket with one finger. The brother watched what was happening and exclaimed that even the master could not resist worldly temptations. Before the boy took the talisman from the girl's neck, he thought that this was definitely the treasure of the earth. Gu Tianju realized that the master was just holding her, and he was inventing all sorts of things for himself. GCI said that it looked like he was sick again and suddenly became sharply interested in some strange small stones. Gu Tianren explained that this was her grandfather's ancient collection. It drives away evil spirits and nourishes the soul. If her hero is interested in this, then she asks to come to their house since his grandfather has a lot of treasures. Li Jian thought that her grandfather probably really knows that this is the cultivation of immortality, and it would definitely not hurt him to get heavenly treasures that could help him. So it's better to go and check. And so he finally agreed, and they headed towards the Gu estate. The guys were already approaching the large, beautiful gate. Meanwhile, the table in the room had already been set, and there were many delicious dishes on it. GCI noted that this is the greatest luxury. Do these nobles really have some special rules of etiquette? Grandpa met his friend who had gone to great lengths to make his house shine. He asked his comrades to sit down. Before Li Jian had time to sit down, he asked his grandfather where he got this thing from and showed him an amulet with a red stone. Grandfather listened carefully to this question and looked at the boy with interest. He replied that he had a huge collection of these old and dilapidated things. He wondered if it was something special since she attracted his attention. Li Jian said that since he has a huge collection of these things, he should know what is so special about them. GCI couldn't understand what he was even talking about and whether he could say it in human terms. The old man laughed and said that he seemed to understand antiques. He asked if the boy wanted to evaluate the entire collection. Li Jian replied that he would. When the old man asked Gu Tianju and Gu Tianren to take care of Miss GCI for now, he and the boy would go here. GCI began to worry and asked Li Jian where he was going. Gu Tianju asked the girl not to worry because grandfather would not touch him. And now the boy and his grandfather were already heading straight down some corridor. Li Jian thought that if this old man is not lying, then he is afraid that there are too many magical treasures in this world for immortality cultivators. But these magical treasures are clearly not created by superpowers. Then how could they be here? The guys reached the elevator and the door began to open. The old man invited his dear friend into the elevator with him, and now they have already arrived at their destination. In front of them was a huge wooden gate. The boy felt some incredibly strong aura and froze in place. He glanced at this gate and became very interested in what was inside. Grandfather and his friend were already entering the very depths of the room. Li Jian became more and more interested. Suddenly, the grandfather next to him coughed and covered his mouth with a handkerchief. The boy asked what was wrong with him. Grandfather explained that this was an old habit and asked his dear friend not to worry. The wheelchair continued to move further and further around the room. When they had come a long way, Grandfather explained to Li Jian that they were already there. The old man said that his entire collection was here, and he asked his friend to look around. Li Jian thought that with such reserves of magical treasures, there must be many immortal cultivators in this world, but why then was there not a trace left? Although there are also weak superpowers that cannot be shown off. The boy told his grandfather that of course he had a lot of things, but the quality left much to be desired. Just little things that can only interest a practitioner at the foundation stage of Ki. The old man thought that he had spent so much effort and energy on these treasures, but they did not attract his attention at all. He's clearly the one he needs. The grandfather explained to the boy that he could not please his children, and he was quite ashamed of it. He has one more thing that he unfortunately doesn't know how to use, so he wonders if his dear friend can figure it out. He drove up in a wheelchair to one box in which there was a gold ring with a stone inside. Li Jian felt the aura that emanated from this ring and became very interested. It's a damn ring. Its peculiarity lies precisely in its name. Anyone who touches this ring will go crazy, and in the worst case, he will simply burn alive from the black flame escaping from within. Li Jian decided, looking at the old man, that he was testing him. He began to approach the box with the decoration. The boy closed his eyes and said that this was not a curse at all, but Wuju. He was already close to the box. Li Jian came close and the glass scattered in different directions, breaking into small fragments. The old man was very surprised because this guy knows the true name of the ring. Li Jian pointed his hand towards the broken glass box and the ring climbed onto his finger. It was as if it had chosen its owner and settled on his finger. Everything around lit up with a gloomy red-black veil in the form of lightning. The old man got scared and called his dear friend to him. He asked him to wait. The old man's gaze changed, and it was as if a flash occurred in his head. He continued to watch the boy. Li Jian was completely saturated with this ominous haze, but the old man noticed that the flame did not touch him at all. He peered as carefully as possible at the boy, and could not understand what was happening. But one thing the old man understood was that this boy was really the one he was waiting for. Li Jian thought that the Wuju ring is not a treasure at all, but it helps him a lot. The boy closed his eyes and gave the command to enter. The planet began to spin in front of him. There was a spiritual space inside the ancient ring, and he stood in the middle of thick gray smoke. Li Jian opened his eyes and glanced to the side. He felt the breath of the beast next to him. A three-headed hellhound approached him. It was a three-headed dog with huge, sharp fangs. He approached faster and faster, and three evil mouths clattered in front of him. In a past life, the gentleman tried with all his might to pacify the three-headed dog from hell, but he did not expect that he would meet him after being reborn in another world. It's a pity that his cultivation has already been exhausted and only a part of his soul remains. A wild dog who has lost his body dares to use his spiritual consciousness against him. The three-headed dog approached faster and faster and put his powerful clawed paws in front of him. Li Jian asked how his consciousness could be compared with the consciousness of some beast. Suddenly the boy gave the command to this dog to sit, and the dog abruptly stopped in front of him. The dog made terrible sounds as it approached the boy, but still stopped in front of him. Li Jian was enveloped in a bright red light like a veil. He commanded the three-headed dog to sit and obey him. The dog really obeyed and sat down in front of the boy. He was scared and wet with fear. Li Jian saw a small three-headed dog in front of him, and these were already the faces of cute and harmless puppies. The boy took them by the scruff of the neck and asked them to remember that he was now his owner, and if he dares to show disobedience, he will simply crush his soul. Li Jian decided that even though the hellhound only had a soul left, he could use the Wuju ring to create a physical body with the same level of cultivation as its owner. If he is strong, then he will be even stronger, and he will definitely need it in the future. The old man turned to his dear friend and said that he was indeed the man he was looking for. His Gu family is very happy. But before he could finish speaking, drops of scarlet blood began to fly out of his mouth, and his glasses flew down. Li Jian gave him a questioning look and wondered what happened to the old man. The old man's vital signs were unstable, and the wheelchair indicated that medical attention was urgently required. The boy came as close as possible to the old man and began to feel his pulse. It was as if he had scanned his grandfather, and realized that long-term illness and the accumulation of illness in the 5 meridians was definitely the poison of Hengxinzhen. Interestingly, despite the power of the Gu family, someone still dared to poison the head. All this does not concern him at all, but today luck is on his side. In gratitude for Wuju's ring, he decided to save the old man's life. Li Jian began to use his abilities to save the old man. Meanwhile, the son was already approaching his father. There was another guy next to him, and, running up, he asked to move away from his father. The son asked what he did with it. At this time, the doctor was listening to his patient. The boy explained to his son, looking into his eyes, that he was saving his life. The guy got very angry. He asked if he thought he was completely stupid. It is obvious that he wanted to harm the elderly man. Li Jian silently called this guy an ignorant idiot and prepared to use his abilities. The guys ran into the room and the girl asked what happened to her grandfather. Why is he touching the gentleman with his hands? The guy asked how you can call some brat a master. The old man is so stupid that he believed the charlatan. Gu Tianju asked his uncle to move away and said that the gentleman is really a good person, and he probably misunderstood something. The uncle exclaimed that he believed more in what he saw. His father is more important now, but he will take care of him when he recovers. Li Jian looked at him closely and asked how he was going to treat his illness. The guy asked Dr. Andrew to get down to business. The doctor replied that he would do everything he could. The man put his hand in front of him and began to use the healing superpower of hydrotherapy. Manipulating water in the body to heal internal damage is called water healing. Li Jian felt that the poison had already penetrated into the heart, so what the doctor was doing now was all useless. When the old man began to cough up blood more and more, the guys became worried about him and began to call their father. Dr. Andrew apologized to Mr. Gu and said that his symptoms were too strange and his superpowers would not help. He gave advice to prepare for Mr. Gu's funeral. Gu Tianren exclaimed with tears in her eyes that everything would be fine with her grandfather. Uncle said that it was not Dr. Andrew's fault. He began to blame this brat for everything, and he said that he must have done something to him while they were gone. The girl asked to stop. Since Dr. Andrew couldn't do anything, let the gentleman try, because she wants to save her grandfather. The uncle exclaimed that he had harmed her grandfather and how dare she allow him to even touch him. He said that he was completely against it. The boy crossed his arms over his chest and said that if they continue to waste time, then no one will help their father. The man called him too self-confident and said that he had no right to say anything here. Mr. Andrew is the city's main healer, and he never fails. And now it's all because he did something to the old man. Li Jian said that he had already prevented him from saving his father several times. He really doubts his medical skills. If they have some ulterior motives and are now deliberately stretching out time, then this is their problem. But the old man needs to be saved as soon as possible. The uncle clenched his teeth and looked askance at the boy. He asked if he still dared to argue and asked the guards to arrest the killer. Li Jian called them a bunch of idiots and held the ring in front of him. With one movement of his hand, he asked his friend to come out and play with them. A 3-headed beast in the form of a huge fanged dog came out of the ring and began to approach the opponents. One of the bodyguards was shocked and scared. Is this really the superpower of summoning? How can such a summoned creature even exist? And it's just creepy. Gu Tianju thought that he couldn't even reach the beast summoning level. The savior is truly unsurpassed. The guy was trying to figure out who he was. The uncle fell on his butt and asked who he was. Li Jian decided that he had better become more polite, otherwise he would not be able to cope with the consequences. After some time, his condition worsened due to lack of blood and ki, but this is not a problem for him. As long as virtually unreal conditions are combined and the meridians are stimulated, toxins can be eliminated from the body. The boy began to use freezing and many needles flew toward the old man. The guys couldn't understand what he was doing. Gu Tianren said that her hero is simply incredible. The uncle said that if the grandfather could not be cured, then he was even interested in what he could do in this case. Li Jian threw many needles towards the old man, and they stuck into his forehead, face, and shoulders. Streams of sweat remained running down the old man's face, and the needles on his forehead glowed with a golden light. The doctor was very surprised and asked if this was Chinese acupuncture. Chinese acupuncture is one of the best medical techniques in the country. When used correctly, it can help load the meridians, strengthen the body, and eliminate evil. It's just that in our time, superpowers are increasingly used in medicine, and ancient medical knowledge has been lost. Yes, and he only heard about it. But there is a lot of information about this. The old man lit up with light black smoke that came out from under the needles from his body. The remnants of poison accumulated in the vessels of the heart must be dislodged and removed with a surge of energy. Li Jian concentrated all his energy and strength and directed it towards the old man. Suddenly, he woke up and started coughing. Grandfather spat out a few drops of black dirty blood. Gu Tianren began calling her grandfather and walked towards him. They were very worried about him. When Gu Tianju approached the old man, he asked the boy if he really failed to save him. Uncle smiled sarcastically and said of course. He said that he would not be able to learn it. But grandfather began to open his eyes and they noticed that the old man had finally woken up. Gu Tianju walked up to the old man and hugged him, exclaiming that he had scared them to death. The granddaughter also hugged her grandfather with tears in her eyes. The old man asked them to calm down because everything was fine with him. The uncle was shocked and could not believe that the boy had seriously cured him. The old man said that this was the first time since he fell ill that he felt so well. Grandfather looked at the boy and thanked his dear friend for curing him. Li Jian replied that he was able to save him because he is here now. But in the future, if someone poisons him again, he can only pray. The guys were very surprised by his words. His uncle asked him not to think that he could say such things just because he cured his father. Who could do such a thing under the protection of the Gu family? His father's health deteriorated due to his research into superpowers. Li Jian told his uncle that he continued to slander, that it was he who offended the master. Gu Tianren said that her uncle always seemed a little strange to her. Grandpa hasn't been studying superpowers for a long time. Gu Tianju added that grandfather always had the health of an ox, although in the early stages he had problems with his legs due to his superpowers. But he had no other problems and began taking Uncle Demian's medicine. And then his health deteriorated. The uncle took the boy by the scruff of the neck and asked what he was talking about. Some leftist person just said such nonsense and he was already starting to doubt him. Does he really not believe his uncle? The guy asked his uncle to calm down and said that he was just reasoning. The old man cast a questioning glance at them. He closed his eyes and said, "Show the medicine to his friend," which is what he took. Can his son try it to prove his innocence? Then the uncle began to ask if the father really doubted his own son. He exclaimed that Li Jian was deliberately setting him up. Then the boy, taking the flask with liquid in his hands, said that since it was not poison, then let him drink it. The uncle began to deny and move back. He asked his father how he could be so careless with medications. The doctor suddenly remembered that Mr. Gu said that this medicine was made from various natural herbs, and it was safe for ordinary people to drink. The uncle thought that he wouldn't let the boy ruin his day. He just wouldn't allow it. How dare he set him up? The guy pulled out a pistol from his bosom and started shooting at Li Jian. The bullet flew out of the gun, but the boy grabbed it with 2 fingers, stopping it. He replied that he thought this could be counted as an admission that the medicine was poisoned. Grandfather got angry and asked Demian what all this meant. The uncle exclaimed that there was nothing wrong with this medicine, and that the doctor must have poisoned him and set him up. The doctor replied that this was not so, and how dare he poison the master's medicine. Li Jian cast a contemptuous glance at his uncle, and said that apparently he would not give up until he saw the Yellow River. The boy knocked the pistol out of the hands of this scoundrel and he grabbed his hand. His arm was covered with wounds and he began to scream in pain and twisted his face. Gu Tianju asked where his uncle got the red birthmark on his arm. The granddaughter also asked what it was. The doctor replied that it was not a birthmark, but most likely a scar from poison that eats away the skin. When he arrived, he noticed that his breathing was irregular. He poisons the old man's medicine with crushed red root, and over time the poison penetrated his skin. It is not fatal, but can take several years of life. My uncle was very scared and asked if he too had been poisoned. The man exclaimed that he did not want to die. There are only a few people in China who can cure red root poison. The man began to beg the boy to help him and fell to his knees in front of him. Gu Tianren was upset and looked at her uncle and said that he really gave poison to her grandfather. The boy asked him to get out immediately and pushed the man to the floor. He began to beg for help and reach out to his grandfather. He told his father that he knew he was wrong. Because of his obsession, he made a huge mistake and asks for forgiveness. But the old man replied that he wanted to poison and kill his own father, and also slandered others. He is afraid that he does not belong in the Gu family. He looked menacingly at his son, and said that it was better for him to go to the inspectorate and refresh his memory. Uncle was seriously scared and streams of sweat ran down his face. When he heard about the inspection, he began to tremble with fear. He asked his father not to do this because the inspection department is an inhuman place. The guards began to take the guy out into the street, and he never stopped calling his father. Gu Tianren said that she couldn't believe that her uncle could do such a thing, and weren't they family? The brother asked the girl not to be sad because fortunately the gentleman was here today. Otherwise, grandfather would not have been saved. The old man apologized to his dear friend and said that it was all due to poor discipline, which made them laugh. Now he feels great, and will at least discuss some things with him. He asked if he knew where the belief about the Wuju ring came from. In front of us is Gu Wen's clean, spacious office. There was a man sitting at the table, and opposite him was Li Jian. The old man handed his friend some photographs and asked him to look at them. The boy took a stack of photographs and began to study them carefully. Li Jian looked at one of them and decided that these were relics of cultivators. As a young man, he once discovered a tomb and sent people to explore it. Most of the old collections, including the Wuju ring, were discovered in this tomb. For a ruin of such a scale, it must have been like a spiritual cultivation, full of spiritual energy. Most likely there is something else hidden underground, and perhaps this will help him in his cultivation. He asked where these ruins are now. The old man explained that it so happened that in the process of exploring the tomb, his subordinates were stupid and triggered a mechanism, as a result of which it self-destructed and collapsed, so that his dear friend won't be able to take a look in person. However, if he needs it so much, he will try to find the remaining relics for him. Li Jian asked the old man if he thought it was funny that a superpower researcher wanted to help him with his practice. The old man answered his dear friend that he didn't even know what a long and winding story it was. When the old man was young, he was very obsessed with power and money. He thought that with absolute power and superpowers, he could have both. But after thoroughly researching superpowers, Lao Chen realized that the powers had huge drawbacks. This seemingly enormous force like a poppy destroys the human mind. But after thoroughly researching superpowers, Lao Chen realized that the powers had huge drawbacks. This seemingly enormous force like a poppy destroys the human mind. Little did he know that as he peered into the abyss, he had long since plunged into its depths, like a tormented soul trapped in the darkness that it was so eager to comprehend. The old man held onto the chair with his hand and squeezed the handle so that his tendons were visible on his arm. He explained that the power of superhuman abilities far exceeds the capabilities of ordinary people, and he is afraid that those who are just as naive and reckless will repeat the same mistakes, so he secretly studied the ancient practices. Li Jian thought that it turns out that the creation of superpowers is the creation of immortals that can become possessed by evil spirits. The old man said that he did not dare ask his dear friend for anything in return. Being able to help him is a blessing for his Gu family. Well, if he, his dear friend, could teach him the art of innocence of brilliance, he would entrust the future of his family only to him. The boy turned away from the old man and replied that only those who discovered ancient religions could discuss the terms. Spread in front of us was the very dirty Wang Jin Hall. The man was sitting on a chair in the middle of the room. The guy approached his father and asked how he was doing. Did he teach that idiot a lesson for him? The guy couldn't understand what it was and what gang this old bastard had gotten involved with again. The son asked if he was really his father and how he was beaten like that. The man got very angry and hit his son in the face. He called him a useless piece and exclaimed that he was always causing him problems. The guy took his cheek with his hand and sadly asked his father why he hit him. The man became even more angry and began to kick out his son. He asked him to get out of sight. How dare he insult his master? The man sat on a chair and looked ahead. The beaten father held his wounded head with his hand and called the guy a self-confident scoundrel. He chose to fight the wrong person. Of all people, he ended up with Li Jiang. A guy approached his father and asked the gentleman to calm down. Now that Wan Jin has provoked the Gu family, it is useless to continue to anger the young master. Their main priority now is to entertain their distinguished guests from the east. The man then asked him to hurry up. If he messes up again, he will make him regret that he was even born. The next day came, clear and sunny. Before us is Yajun University. GCI walked down the corridor with Li Jiang. She asked what he talked about with Mr. Gu last night. The girl remembered the old man who happily waved at her after they returned. She explained to the boy that when he left he had no face, and when he came out to see him off, he was all glowing with joy. The boy replied to his sister that they were discussing some deals. GCI wondered if he was going to get married. She exclaimed, lowering her head, that this could not be. Li Jian asked why not. The girl turned to the boy and said, looking into his eyes, that he could not leave her and his mother. While the girl was saying this to her brother, men appeared next to him and called him by name. This is Brother Hu. Did he hear that Li Jian beat Hu yesterday because of his stupidity? He probably wants to settle scores with him now. Finally, there will be an interesting show now. The guys clenched their fists and approached the boy and fell on their knees in front of him. They asked for forgiveness and said that they were wrong, and now at the university the last word would be his. The guys around could not understand what was happening and why Brother Hu was treating this fool like this. After all, he is the director's son, and why should he be afraid, or does this fool have supporters? The guys decided it was better not to provoke the boy in the future. Li Jian asked Hu to get lost and not come one step closer to him and GCI. The girl was very surprised by this turn of events and, blushing a little, moved on. She picked up the phone and beads of sweat began to run down her face. What did she see there, since her look changed so much? Li Jian turned to the girl and, throwing a questioning glance at her, asked if everything was okay. The girl replied that there was nothing wrong and the couples had almost begun. She asked him to go faster. A few days later, it was a sunny Saturday and the sun was shining on Yajun University. Li Jian sat in the lotus position with his eyes closed. One of the guys asked why he was frozen there. The second said that he knew this special condition of his very well. Another classmate of theirs asked to speak more quietly. This guy is supported by Chen Hu. The guys who were just discussing Li Jian lit up with a bright blue haze. They felt something was wrong behind them and became wary. One of the guys asked why he couldn't move his legs. The second exclaimed that it had become sharply cold outside. They began to blame each other for this. After all, they insulted Li Jian and he heard it. The boy really bound them with his strength and thought that this was a bunch of unremarkable people. They can't even stand the aura he involuntarily exudes. Pointing his finger forward, he asked them to leave. The guys were writhing in pain and trying to get to their feet as quickly as possible, but they had difficulty doing so. One of them asked what had just happened. The second exclaimed that this was the firstborn of chaos. The guys really felt very scared and looked to the side in fear. Li Jian gave them a serious look. One glance was enough for them to run away from this sight. The guys began to run away as fast as they could, and finally asked the boy for forgiveness. They admitted that they were wrong. Li Jian clenched his fist and thought that the 7th level of Qi purification, the aura realm, is very subtle, and the ability to cultivate to this level is the limit. It's a pity that they don't know when Grandpa Gu will find a place full of spiritual energy to make a breakthrough in establishing the foundations. Li Jian answered Aunt Willow's call. The woman exclaimed that Ji Chengtian had just come home and taken their GCI. The boy immediately asked where they had gone and rushed as fast as he could towards the house. At this time, the father was walking next to his daughter and asked his good one to walk faster, calling her his smart daughter. GCI lowered her gaze and said in confusion that she would help him. But after that, they were no longer father and daughter. The father asked the girl not to be so callous. Ji Chengtian told the girl that he doesn't waste words, so he promises to never interfere in their lives again. The man looked at his daughter and said that they were already there. They found themselves near large wooden doors. When the man led the girl into the room, a young man appeared in front of them. He sat at the table with a glass of wine and told GCI that they had not seen each other for a long time. In front of us lies the tall, spacious Drunken Dragon Hotel. The high-rise building rose to the sky. Li Jian walked to this hotel, but the security on the street apologized and explained that the hotel was temporarily closed. The boy looked at one of the guys and asked where GCI was. His gaze was very serious and stern. The guard thought that GCI was the girl that the Eastern Lord invited to his luxurious banquet. They can't let this guy bother the Eastern Lord. Then the man replied that he did not understand who he was talking about. Their hotel is not a place where anyone can break into, so he urges him to leave the area as soon as possible. Li Jian asked his friend to step aside. The man exclaimed that if he did not understand the words, then they would speak differently. They began to approach the boy to attack. In their hands were large and heavy bats. Li Jian gave them a disdainful look and began to use his defensive abilities. The guys began to fly apart in the air, falling on their backs and hitting the cold floor with a cry for help. He began to approach the next guard and he asked what he wanted from them. He explained that their hotel was booked today by an Eastern family. If he goes in there, he won't just get away with it. The boy again asked where GCI was. In front of him was a man with a cigarette and his friend. He asked why they were making noise, and if he disturbs their respected guests, then it will not be difficult for him to throw him out of here in fear. The guard pointed his finger at this man and exclaimed that it was all because of him. A man with a cigarette approached the boy and asked where this wild guy came from, who dared to make a mess on his territory. He asked someone to throw him into the pool and let the snakes feast on him. The guy whispered in his ear that this was Li Jian. The man immediately changed his face, not expecting that it was he who would now appear in front of them. Suddenly his hand seemed to be frozen. The cigarette immediately flew out of his hand and began to fall to the floor. The man approached the boy and said with a smile that this was Li Jian, his brother, and he admitted that he did not recognize him right away. He immediately apologized and asked what brought him to his modest hotel as a drunken dragon. He seems to be in an excellent mood. Li Jian asked where GCI is now. The guy explained to his commander that the Eastern Lord invited this girl and she is now with Li Jiang. The man answered the boy that Miss Tsai is now in a luxurious room with her friends. He ordered the guards to take his brother Li Jian there immediately. Then the guy asked the gentleman if he would really let the boy in, because the Eastern Lord would definitely not forgive them for it so easily. The gentleman asked in response what else he could do. If they don't let Li Jian in, there will be problems with the Gu family. The man gave the command to tell the Gu family everything. It is necessary to secure at least their favor. Meanwhile, the man was sitting on a sofa in front of a small table and drinking coffee. He didn't think that everything would be so simple. Now there will be a bright streak for his family. He smiled maliciously and silently asked the girl to understand her daddy. After all, everyone is chasing fame and money. In order to reach an agreement with the Dongfang family, he must sacrifice her. But it's not so bad. In the end, this is a successful match and many people dream of this. The man drank coffee and closed his eyes, and said that all people are a herd that cannot do anything worthwhile. When he opened his eyes, he saw Li Jian in front of him. He got up from the table and asked the guy to get out of here. He asked him not to force him to reach out to him. But before the man could finish speaking, the boy grabbed him by the throat with one hand. He exclaimed that a father betraying his own daughter was too much. He clearly has a lot of kindness. The man screamed and asked him to let him go immediately. Li Jian promised that he would die by his hand. The boy lifted this man up and threw him as hard as he could against the wall. He began to cough very badly and thought that Li Jian seemed to have become a different person. Meanwhile, a girl was sitting at a table with a guy to whom her father had brought her. He explained to GCI that they had not seen each other for so long, but she was still irresistible. The guy extended his hand towards the girl and said that her eyes sparkled like precious stones. As soon as he saw her, he lost his head. He extended his hand to the girl and almost touched her neck. She moved away from him. The girl asked not to touch her. She pulled her hand back. Well, the boy asked her not to frown, because he was only joking. GCI said that Ji Chengtian invited her to have dinner with him. As she sees they are finished, so she is about to leave. The guy began to drink a glass of wine and said that if she wanted, she could go and he would not stop her. But did she think what her father would do to her mother in such a case? The girl became very angry and blushed looking at him. The guy asked her to stay with him a little longer. He knows that he didn't make the best impression on her, but he also finds it difficult to suppress his emotions. The guy continued to say that in fact he came to dot the I's. GCI returned and sat down at the table again. He asked her to drink more wine and they would discuss everything. Does she know that he can be trusted? The girl couldn't understand why he was suddenly so kind. But if she upsets him, then father will offend mother. The guy thought that he had mixed an intoxicating solution into the wine, which he had bought on the black market. A person who drinks it will fall madly in love with the person sitting opposite. He asked the girl to drink it all to the bottom, and then she would definitely become his. Suddenly they heard some noise. GCI immediately turned around at this noise, and the guy also became a little wary. He asked who else it was. The boy could not understand who dared to stop them. Li Jian appeared on the threshold. He calmly walked into the door that he had just knocked down with his strength. The boy cast a contemptuous glance at his opponent and said that he had come for GCI. When the girl saw her friend, she immediately got up from the table and was delighted at his arrival. She was scared and immediately approached the boy. Li Jian was just looking at this guy. He got up from the table and began to approach his opponent. The guy asked if he had decided to confuse all his cards. He clenched his fist, and a blue transparent haze enveloped his hand. He began to use his abilities. The guy wanted to kill his opponent and began to approach him to strike. The girl took Li Jian's hand, but the boy asked her not to be afraid and pulled her aside. He said, looking into the eyes of his opponent, that he had lost his control because of the drink. With just one blow, he pushed the guy far back. A bright golden ball shone around them. Drops of scarlet blood began to splash from the enemy's mouth. He started coughing loudly. He could not understand what had happened and what kind of guy had appeared. Where did he get such strength that with one light blow he crushed him with his back against the wall? Li Jian came as close to the guy as possible and said that he had insulted his family, so he should teach him a lesson. The boy put his palm straight in front of him and a volley of fire flew towards the enemy. Ji Leikong, the 9th-level bodyguard of the Dongfang family, appeared in front of him. He held in his hands a huge metal shield made of a super-resistant metal alloy. He told his master that the man's strength should not be underestimated. They must go to a safe place and leave the solution to the problem to their subordinates. But the guy replied that he would not rest until his head was blown off, and he wanted to kill him. The man listened to his master and walked towards Li Jian. He definitely wanted to avenge his master. The boy looked at his opponents and said that he would show them a few tricks today. The bodyguard responded by saying that he was strong and too arrogant. No one dares to harm the young master. That's why he's about to rip his heart out of his chest. The man pulled out a super powerful weapon. When the bodyguard pointed his weapon towards his opponent, his master began to run away. He covered himself with his hands as the fragments flew towards him. He asked not to dare to offend him. Li Jian noticed an interesting ability, collecting true energy in the body and then reproducing it. But still, this is just a mediocre imitation of cultivation, and he is not as scary as he pretends to be. The bodyguard took out a weapon in the form of a sickle island that came out of his hand. He pointed this weapon towards his opponent, but Li Jian dodged to the side in time. The enemy's hand was near his shoulder and the boy grabbed it with his hand. He made a deft move and turned the bodyguard over to the floor. He hit his back and sprawled on the floor. A bright light ball glowed in his open mouth. Apparently, the man began to use another type of weapon, and a bright explosion occurred. Li Jian dodged this very cleverly, and told his opponent that he had done it too slowly by stopping the bullets. The bodyguard was simply shocked and noticed that he stopped even his improved attack, and where did he get such crazy speed? There was an explosion again, and many bright yellow lightning bolts scattered around. This is simply unthinkable. People with such strength and speed simply cannot exist a priori. Li Jian was already approaching his opponent and knocked him back with a powerful blow. The man could not understand whether he really possessed an extremely rare combination of superpowers, a fusion of strength and speed. The boy got ahead of him again, and the enemy ended up on the other side, very surprised. Li Jian raised his leg up and struck the bodyguard directly in the chest. He flew far back again and hit his back against the wall. The boy began to use the dragon seal. Meanwhile, on the street, a man heard an explosion and could not understand what was happening there. He thought that they didn't need trouble, but many fragments of stones flew straight towards him. The bodyguard hit the floor with his strong fist, and it began to crack. The man asked where he got these abilities. Li Jian asked him to think about it for himself, and gave him a serious look. He explained that the gap between them is gigantic, and unlike him, he does not value life. He's a creature with a human face but the soul of a beast, and does he want to fight him? But the bodyguard was holding a flask of poison in his hands. He explained that his loyalty is unwavering. As soon as he entered the Dongfang family, he began to obey them unquestioningly, and this is his principle of being a man. No matter what happens, he will complete the task. The bodyguard began to inject poison into his neck. Energy amplifier type NB increases the user's energy power in a short period of time, while affecting life expectancy. Li Jian watched what this man was doing now and went to meet him. He noticed that energy similar to spiritual power was bubbling inside him. However, she is a little different from her. The bodyguard's eyes immediately changed their color and glowed with a bright, fiery flame. He began to use powerful weapons. Huge cannons appeared in his hands and fire began to fly out of them. But the boy put up protection and surrounded himself with a bright, glowing flame. He noticed that this attack was indeed stronger than the previous one, and put his hand in front of him. Li Jian decided that it was time to end this all. He snapped the finger that had the ring on it. A three-headed, huge, toothy dog emerged from the ring. The bodyguard started screaming. He was shocked and couldn't think what kind of superpower this guy had. He had a summoner in his hands, and this was his great strength. The man began to use his new weapon in the form of many grenades in one hand. He threw these grenades towards the three-headed dog, and it began to fly back. The bodyguard did not calm down and pointed 3 huge guns towards the beast. Many volleys of fire flew towards the three-headed dog. They approached him faster and faster. But the dog didn't give up so easily. Red-black smoke came out of its mouth and the beast was preparing to jump. But the bodyguard shouted that he would not give up. It became covered in thick, dark smoke. Li Jian was behind the man and exclaimed that the outcome was obvious. He gave him a disdainful look. The boy began to use the Jiaoxu sword of the first style and pointed it towards his opponent. This sword created by Bai Shu, now known as Li Jian, has 6 styles: accumulation, direction, awareness, thought, fusion, and sixth sense. The 6th-style sword had been considered one of the most powerful blades in the cultivation world since its introduction. The first style splits a person, piercing his heart right through. What about a world where abilities rule? Interest in cultivating immortality and righteousness will never dry up. Suddenly, a girl appeared behind him. GCI hugged Li Jian and exclaimed that she was scared to death. But the boy turned to her and explained that everything was fine and they wouldn't harm her. GCI asked if he summoned this dog and where he even got the ability to summon animals. The boy explained to the girl that this dog was his subordinate and he had saved him more than once. Meanwhile, the father raised his son. He couldn't understand how the degenerate defeated a level 9 person and asked him to be careful. The guy thought that in his entire life, no one dared to openly attack him in the presence of a member of the Dongfang family. Li Jian stood with the girl in the middle of the room. The guy started approaching them. The guy whom he beat so brutally asked if he thought he could leave here alive. Suddenly, in the room they heard the voice of an old man who said that they needed to take care of the family. The guy was very surprised when he heard this familiar voice and turned around. In front of them was an old man in a wheelchair. He asked if the guy valued his family. Then the guy asked how he could forget that there was a Gu family that had nothing better to do than constantly cross the path of the Dongfang family. Usually you can't find the head of the family, so why is he here now? His father invited him so many times and it was all to no avail. He doesn't even show up at the Chamber of Commerce. He became very interested in what he was doing here. The father of the beaten son also asked what Mr. Gu was doing here. It's understandable why this idiot acts so openly because he has the support of the Gu family. The old man said that due to his carelessness, these two ungrateful people offended Li Jian. He asked the boy if he was angry. Li Jian replied that everything was fine, only GCI was a little scared. The old man replied that he was terribly embarrassed in front of him. He asked to take Mrs. G to a quiet place and get some rest themselves. Grandfather asked me to entrust the rest to him. One of the guys, when the boy was leaving, said after him that he was lucky today and would survive. But the guy whom he beat badly did not let up. He exclaimed that Li Jian hid behind the Gu family and was also talking about preserving life. The old man explained that Li Jian had once saved him, so insulting him was equivalent to insulting the Gu family. Apparently he needs to be taught some manners. When the guards grabbed him, he asked Mr. Gu why this loser was so important to him. Their family has always cooperated, but here he decided to destroy everything because of some little thing. The old man asked in response how the Dongfang family could be their partner. Li Jian is the future heir of the Gu family. The guy was simply shocked and asked whether the gentleman really decided to take the side of this idiot. The old man replied that since the Dongfang family declared war on them, the Gu family would accept this fight, but the guy asked them to make an informed decision. He thought that a quarrel with the Gu family would definitely result in problems for them, and it would be almost impossible to cooperate. The head of the family will punish him, and they will no longer trust him to run the family business, and that will just be the end. The bodyguards began to beat the guy because he was insolent and rude to Old Man Gu, but the guy exclaimed to Mr. Gu that he was wrong and would never do that again. The old man turned to him and replied that insulting Li Jian was unforgivable, and this was his lesson. Meanwhile, the father of the beaten guy grimaced and beads of sweat ran down his face. He walked up to his hospital bed and said that he was very sorry. The guy explained to his father that Li Jian is the son of his ex-wife, and he has an unusual relationship with the Gu family. How could he not know about this? The man replied that he really didn't know. He had just been informed that customers had refused a large number of orders, and the G family had suffered heavy losses. Li Jian leaves him no choice either. The guy began to curse this boy and the Gu family. He said that it would be much easier if the head of the family did not seek the results of the superpower research from the Gu family. How he could thoroughly enjoy their suffering. The man said that his status was high, so it was not appropriate to get his hands dirty. Moreover, the Gu family is not so easy to harm. However, they can get rid of Li Jian through the wrong hands. The guy asked if he meant them. The man replied that he understood him correctly, and asked to let them send Li Jian straight to hell. Meanwhile, it was already night outside. Many fires were burning in the houses. GCI approached her bathroom and began to climb into it, sighing heavily. The girl plunged completely into the bath and began to enjoy the hot water. Li Jian has changed a little lately. He still sometimes says strange things, but he is no longer so weak and will not let anyone hurt him. He also awakened a very powerful superpower in himself, doing something she had never seen before. When he gets serious, you need to expect trouble. GCI couldn't understand what he was thinking about. Meanwhile, the boy was sitting on the sofa and holding a thick book in front of him. He was reading quietly and heard a knock on the door. The boy glanced at the door and got up from the sofa. He thought that, of course, the guy did not accept defeat and decided to send a mercenary to him. However, warm breath emanates from this person. Li Jian walked to the door and began to open it. In front of him was a beefy guy who was a bodyguard. He asked what he was doing here. The bodyguard fell to his knees in front of the boy and said that his abilities were incredibly strong. Li Jian's heart is immensely kind and he did not kill him. He exclaimed that the boy was a man of justice. He explained that he had already left the Dongfang family and wanted to come under his command. Li Jian replied that he simply did not want to get his hands dirty and was free. But the man began to beg him to forgive him because he was wrong. He is ready to do any job as long as Mr. Li Jian gives him a chance. Then the boy, looking into his eyes, asked what the reason was. The bodyguard replied that since childhood he loved reading short stories about heroes like him. He is no match for him at all and has never seen such superpowers. He is definitely one of the strongest masters in the world. He wants to become the same. Just let the gentleman call him to stay, otherwise let him kill him right now. Li Jian thought that he was originally a minion of the Dongfang family, and now wants to go over to him. Is it really that simple? It was worth hitting him and bringing him to his senses. However, his physique and abilities are different from ordinary people, and this can be useful. The boy agreed and said that he could keep an eye on the door. This will be the first order for now. The man immediately obeyed his master and began to carry out his orders. When the boy returned, GCI came out to meet him, kind of wondering who was there. Li Jian replied that it was Ji Laikong who came. He will protect them all if he is not around. There was another knock on the door. It was Gu Tianren. The boy asked her if she had urgent business with him. The girl smiled at her brother and greeted him by waving her hand and closing her eyes. GCE approached them and asked what was happening this time. The girl replied that her grandfather asked her to give something to her brother. She explained that grandfather said that in their family there was no worthy treasure that would suit a brother. She pointed to 2 guards who opened suitcases with awards inside and asked to take a look. GCI thought to herself that for some reason the old man was sending something to Li Jiang again. Does he really want to appease him? The boy looked and noticed that the quality of the magic weapon was not the best, but he could use it to make more advanced ones. He said the only thing missing was the forge. Gu Tianren smiled and said that her grandfather had a forge in an antique store. It is convenient to carry with you since it is sealed in a cube. Grandfather was worried that opening it would affect the quality of the treasure, so he wants him to personally come for it. Li Jian replied that he would leave immediately. GCI couldn't understand what these 2 were planning to do in the middle of the night. She said it was too late, and it might be too dangerous. Then the boy turned to the girl and asked what danger she was talking about now. Li Jian thought for a moment and realized that she was worried about today's events. Then he turned to the girl and said that he would better come to his grandfather tomorrow morning. She agreed with her brother and said that she would come by tomorrow morning. Li Jian, when he closed the door, told GCI that there was no need to worry so much. He hugged the girl by the shoulders and said that he would not allow anyone to offend her. The girl looked down and said that she was not worried about herself. She worries that he might be kidnapped. The boy scratched his head with his hand and asked what kind of kidnapping she was talking about. And then the next day came. Li Jian had already headed towards the old man's residence. They were greeted by the store owner, Zhang Ming. He had no abilities and asked the guys who they were. He greeted Mrs. Gu. The girl thought that she was glad to spend time with her brother. She explained to the man that this was a very good friend of the Gu family, Li Jian. The man smiled and replied that in this case he would ask for forgiveness from the master. He asked the distinguished guests, if he was not mistaken, whether they had come from Mr. Gu's antiques, and asked permission to accompany them. The man explained that no one had touched this treasure during his entire stay here. He asked Mr. Li if he would deign to check. But the boy suddenly said that this was a low-quality product and it was necessary to get rid of it. The man was very surprised and exclaimed that this was the treasure of the store and they could not get rid of it. The boy felt an ominous aura around him and purple smoke began to spread throughout the room. Gu Tianren asked her brother to wait for her. The man also didn't want Mr. Li Jian to go there. But the boy began to head deeper and deeper into the room to where this light purple smoke was coming from. He asked how about it and approached the room boarded up with boards. The man asked the gentleman to look at something else but not to touch it. After all, it is untouchable. He explained that he spent a lot of money to seal it. If it explodes, it'll be the end of them all. Li Jian thought that the closer he got to the door, the more energy he felt. This is definitely meant for him. The man asked the lady what Mr. Li's level was. The girl replied that she had no idea, but all she knows is that this guy is very strong. Li Jian continued to walk towards the closed door. Nothing could stop him, and he clenched his fists and went for what he needed. Meanwhile, someone saw him watching from the side. Did he really find it? Li Jian finally walked to the door and opened it with a bold, deft movement. Behind the door on the floor was a circle with a 5-pointed star and various symbols on it. In front of him, the boy saw a forge of divine quality, and it was simply beautiful. Li Jian pointed his finger at him and wanted to break the shackles. This forge lit up with a bright yellow-golden flame and seemed to begin to rise. There was this purple, ominous smoke coming out of it from several holes. Smoke enveloped the entire room around and began to approach the guys faster and faster. Li Jian exclaimed that he had finally woken up. The man covered his head with his hand and began shouting that it was all over for them all. There was an ominous laugh and some huge evil monster began to crawl out of this vessel. A monster with sharp long fangs began to shout that he was terribly hungry. Gu Tianren could not understand how this forge turned out to be alive. She said that she had never seen anything like this before. The monster kept talking about how he wanted his brains. The monster stood up screaming and approaching his opponents. The man grabbed his head with his hands and said that they were all corpses. Li Jian put his hand to the side and began to use his strength against the monster. The monster growled and said that it would eat his brains. He approached the boy. Li Jian noticed that he was too wayward and decided to teach him a lesson. But the monster only talked about how he wanted to devour his brains, and drool flowed from his mouth. The boy began to use the Linyue sword technique, the second style. After that, he used the strangulation technique. The monster began to scream even louder and move several meters back. He collapsed to the ground and screamed in pain, still talking about the brain. The monster became very small. The boy gave the command to the little monster to serve him or die. Gu Tianren came running and asked her brother if it was all over. Gu Tianju said that he scared him to death. Li Jian extended his hand in front of him and it glowed with a bright golden light. He asked the man how long it would take to kill him. The man who was standing behind the door fell backwards, breaking the door. He began to apologize to his boss. Li Jian asked him who his customer was. The guy asked the boss to calm down and promised to explain everything to him. He began to use a low-level spider network and said that first he must meet with the King of Hell. He asked to underestimate the enemy and threatened to cut off his head and receive a reward for it. The guy couldn't think why he wasn't cut by his spider web. After all, his web has become stronger, and what's wrong? Li Jian looked menacingly at his opponent and asked him to show him what he was capable of. The monster started screaming again and wanting to eat the brains. He extended his huge clawed paws towards the enemy. The monster began to attack the guy who attacked Li Jian. He did not expect such a turn of events. The guy was enveloped in dark, ominous lightning that came from an evil monster. The monster wanted to eat the brains of its victim and began to approach the guy faster and faster. Li Jian turned to him and reminded him that he was now his servant, and his old bad habits should be eliminated. The monster lowered his gaze when the boy scolded him. Li Jian walked up to the guy lying on the floor. He took his hand in his and looked at the clothes. On the wrist was a wristband with a pentagram. The man got scared and asked if this was a church of bloody demons. The Blood Demon Church is an exceptional organization of assassins that has existed for thousands of years. They obey no one. They accept orders only from influential and famous clients. They are crazy fanatics who will do anything to achieve their goal. Death on a mission is common for them. The man asked Mr. Li who he was crossing the road with. The boy replied that he crossed the path of Dongfang Yuanshuo. The man was very surprised and asked if he had really quarreled with the master of the Dongfang family himself. How dare Dongfang Yuanshuo send a killer to his brother? He is simply furious and will immediately call his grandfather. Grandfather was holding a book in his hands. The old man picked up the phone and said that the Gu family would not ignore this. Meanwhile, there was a guy with girls in the restaurant bar. He said that Li Jian brought trouble upon himself. The guy was resting calmly and felt someone's evil breath behind him. The guys took him out into the street and he asked who their boss was and how they dared to steal him. The guards began to push him into the car. The guy exclaimed that the Dongfang family would blow their heads off. The guys threw him onto the floor of the car. Drops of sweat were running down the boy's face. The butler of the Dongfang family, Xin Yun, turned his head back and looked at the guy. He pulled him out of the car and dragged him towards the high gate. The guy asked Xin Yun what he was doing. He continued to pull him by the hair, after which he stepped on his head. He told the young master that he should be aware of the consequences of his actions and respect the Gu family. Otherwise, the head of the family would not be so worried about handing over the young master to him. The man exclaimed that he was Xin Yun, and on behalf of the Dongfang family he apologized. Termination of cooperation will entail great losses for both parties. He hopes that Mr. Gu does not harbor a grudge and will still change his mind. Due to his age, Yuan Shuo insulted the Gu family. He came to personally apologize. Gu Tianju came out to the man and said that his grandfather said that he had insulted their benefactor, and from now on, he was the enemy of their family. The gentleman asked him to leave. Nowadays, it is important for the Dongfang family to preserve the family tradition. Xin Yun replied that the Dongfang family acts at its own discretion in this matter. The old man in the wheelchair said that after what happened, the Dongfang family would not allow this to happen again. Li Jian asked if they called him just for this, but the old man replied that of course it's not just that. He found what the boy was looking for. It was already evening outside. The car was racing along the highway with passengers sitting inside. The boy was sitting in the back seat, and next to him was his father, Xin Yun. He looked at the man and wanted to ask him if it was his father calling, but the man said that the head of the family asked him to tell him that he did not consider him a worthy candidate as the successor of the business. He gave him a disdainful look and said that he need not appear in the Dongfang family anymore. The guy began to beg and ask his father to forgive him. This is all because of that boy Li Jian and it's all his fault. But the man kicked him out of the car. The guy fell straight onto the asphalt. Xin Yun finally told the master to take care of himself. He left him lying on the ground and the car sped off right before his eyes. When Xin Yun left, the guy thought that he was just his father's dog. When he returns to the family and becomes the head, he will be first on his list. And then he will kill Li Jiang and Gu Wen. Meanwhile, Li Jian was sitting in the lotus position in the room next to a huge vessel from which fire was coming out. Bright tongues of yellow-red flame came out very quickly, rising to the ceiling. A lot of thick smoke began to come out of this vessel, and the boy continued to meditate. When his pet climbed out of the vessel, he put his hand forward and gave the command to begin. The monster was very pleased and laughed and began shouting that everything was ready, stretching out his hands forward. The forms of magical weapons differ, but they are all aimed at protection. Any master can break them. The monster continued to squeal that he wanted to eat the brain. Li Jian thought that they could only withstand a few blows. The monster approached the boy and said that it wanted to eat. Li Jian opened the door and walked into the room where the girl was sitting. He asked her for a moment. When the boy came closer to her, Ziqi asked when he managed to buy it. When the boy approached her, the girl decided that this fool had become a little kinder. Li Jian said that he personally made the pendant. He asked to wear it and he would protect her. He will be calmer this way because he won't always be able to be there. Ziki asked where he was going. Li Jian replied that the Gu family had prepared something for him. The girl asked the boy to come back quickly. He was already leaving the door when the bodyguard called his master very loudly. Li Jian put his hand in front of him, and an object suddenly appeared on the bodyguard. The boy looked at his hand and asked the gentleman what it was. Li Jian replied that this thing would help him in his training. He asked to continue guarding the door. If he makes a mistake, his life will turn into hell. The guy completely agreed with his master. Before us is the city of Qingzhan, namely its suburbs. The guys got out of the car and headed forward along the street. Mr. Gu said that the Black Crow is an underground fighting ring. These are fights on the black market, the participants of which are people with superpowers. The owner of the Death Arena is an eccentric person. He will not allow members of the Gu family to enter his territory. Unlike them, brother and sister, the guy asked if the two of them could apply. Gu Tianju replied that he was right. However, under unforeseen circumstances in the arena, they will block the master's entrance to the ruins. Gu Tianren told her brother to relax, to go to the ruins with a calm soul. He can rely on them. Li Jian walked through the door and asked the guys if they were sure of this. Gu Tianju replied that their low levels did not matter here. Participants in the battle must wear special bracelets to suppress their abilities, and they will be on equal footing. Gu Tianren added that her brother's unquenchable fire and her ice spirit will defeat the enemy in 1 or 2 and save lives. Is she right? Li Jian thought that once upon a time, people with a similar mentality did not live long. Before he could voice his thoughts to himself, he grabbed the girl by the shoulder with his hand. She couldn't understand and asked her benefactor what it was. He began to touch her body in different places using acupuncture. She had a very strange feeling. Mr. Gu Tianju turned towards the boy and asked what happened. Before he could ask this question, Li Jian extended his hand in his direction and also pointed his finger at his chest. The guy lit up with a bright flame and his eyes changed. He clenched his fists, not understanding what had happened. Li Jian asked him to concentrate on his feelings. Gu Tianju thought about how his superpower had gotten out of control and what his master had done to him. The boy closed his eyes and beads of sweat ran down his face. His flame no longer burns him, and it is as if it has become a part of him. If he misuses the power, something will surely happen. The guy clenched his fists and lit up with a bright red-yellow flame. Gu Tianren asked her brother why he stopped controlling the power and asked if it was dangerous. The brother asked his sister not to worry, because it was as if he had become different and the flame no longer harmed him. The sister replied that after his words, she also felt changes in her body. A pleasant aroma began to envelop her. This scent is similar to the scent of her benefactor. Li Jian explained that he had removed the seals from their qi. This is their reward for the door to the ruins. The little sister immediately thanked her brother and smiled at him. Gu Tianju also thanked him and said that in the future he would become a great master and would go through fire and water for him. Before us is the Black Crow underground arena. The man told the other that if he lost one more match, he would never see his daughter. Another one said that he sold his eyes, and the guy lost. Gu Tianren told her brother that there are a lot of bandits here. Gu Tianju asked the gentleman to be careful because they are different from the people outside. Branches of the arena of death have spread throughout the world, and this is just one of the rings. The organizers have very serious connections, and the supervision department is powerless here. The place, uncontrolled by anyone, became a haven for robbers. The Gu family doesn't have any power here either. The guy explained that they need to beware of opponents with red bracelets. Men here are considered to be fighters who have survived several deadly fights. People with red bracelets are executioners who have hundreds of similar battles behind them and are not to be trifled with. One of the men asked the girl if they knew each other. He approached Gu Tianren and said that this was the girl from the movie. He asked to look at her face. But the brother approached this scoundrel and asked if he was running into problems. Why do idiots hang around here every year? A complete headache. Li Jian walked up to the man and pushed him. He asked him to get lost immediately. Suddenly, someone grabbed the boy by the shoulder. It was a red bracelet, Luo Shan. He asked if the boy was new and whether he understood where he had come. Why is he even starting to get rowdy here? The man asked to kneel down and admit his mistake, and then he would think about forgiving him or not. Gu Tianju told the gentleman that he had a red bracelet and asked him to be careful. When Luo Shan approached the boy, he felt a strong aura from him and wondered where such a thing came from in the young body. The head of the underground death arena, the Black Crow, Xian Nan, approached him. He asked the man to cool down and said that these were his distinguished guests. They are newbies and don't know the rules yet, and he asks them to forget about it. Luo Shan, leaving, said that the head of Li Jian saved one place. Well, let him not think. He won't remember it. The man explained that Luo Shan is one of the best fighters in his arena, and he has a slightly hot temper. so he is often rude. He asked to be taken to a more suitable place for guests. The head explained that this wine was from his collection, and asked if the Gu family's guest would be willing to have a drink. Meanwhile, Li Jian sensed that there was an immortal cultivator's relic somewhere nearby. The guy told Mr. Xiangnan that, according to the previously agreed-upon conditions, he and his sister were taking part in the duel. But isn't he against Mr. Li Jian's participation? The head replied that it was his right. Xiangnan explained so that they would not tell him later that he had not warned them. They are responsible for any consequences. In addition, they take part in a duel to the death, and he does not lose money. This is pure excitement for him. Gu Tianren asked her brother if he would change his mind and said that it was very dangerous there. She looked at the boy and asked why his brother closed his eyes. Li Jian actually closed his eyes and imagined what was there in front of him. The relic steals souls, and for uninvited guests this will be a problem. The boy asked to reserve a seat for him. He explained that he was going to the ruins. Gu Tianju asked if the gentleman wanted to see their results. It turns out he still worries about them. The boy exclaimed, looking at the master's back, that they would not let him down. Li Jian decided that he needed to deal with the relic first. Meanwhile, there were already a lot of people in the arena, and the guys were cheering for their own people with shouts. One of them shouted for the man to kill his opponent because he had bet money on him. Li Jian, watching the battle, thought that in the past, immortal cultivators often fought to the death and the public just liked it. Li Jian thought that the insidious relic steals souls, but it has a drawback. It does not affect the remnants of the soul. If he enters with a part of his soul, he will not be exposed to any risk and only a small matter remains. And here in front of us is the ruin of an immortal cultivator under the arena of death. Immortal cultivators erect such structures in places where spiritual power accumulates, so that time does not in any way affect the contents of the repository. The boy came closer and asked why there was so much fuss with this relic. He approached one huge statue with sharp fangs and glowing green eyes. There were many of them there. Just as he expected, the cultivators assumed that someone would split the soul and enter the ruins. That's why they posted guards. Their habits are somewhat similar to the habits of the Blood Soul sect in the best of times. He asked how dare a little demon stand in his way. In front of him was a rift of heavenly ki. A powerful explosion occurred and stones began to fly apart, demolishing everything around. The boy thought that they were low-level weapons. What he wants is much deeper. Li Jian suddenly cast a questioning glance to the side. Next to him was a red monster. It was a soul-stealing monster. The boy found himself next to a monster devouring souls. He watched him closely. When Li Jian flew up to him as close as possible, he pointed his finger at him and exclaimed that he should teach him a lesson. The boy began to use the linear sword technique, the second style. Everything around lit up with blue light. This was the path about the path of damnation. The monster began to growl very loudly, showing its sharp fangs. He struck this monster on the spot and it fell straight to the ground. Thick white smoke emanated from it. There were many explosions around, and he directed all his strength to be sure. Li Jian thought about how he couldn't sense the exact direction of the formation. Most likely it was hidden from prying eyes. Before the boy could finish his thoughts, he heard a cry for help not far from him. In the middle of the room, right in a circle drawn on the floor, lay a girl tied in chains. It was Xiang Ying. She lay shackled with heavy chains and called for help. Suddenly, these chains shattered into small pieces, and she screamed again. The girl glanced at her savior and thanked him. She asked the boy his name and asked if his father had sent him. Li Jian realized that he had found information. He told the girl that if she wants to live, she must return to her body. She immediately agreed and asked if he would go with her. The girl explained that she was scared alone. Looking at this boy, she thought that although he was cold, he was handsome. Li Jian continued to watch what was happening and thought that he could only wait for her before entering the ruins. The boy folded his arms across his chest and with a serious face thought about his plans, which were slowly coming true. The next doubles fight will take place between the Mo brothers, Mo Qian and Mo Huo, and the guests of the Gu family, Gu Tianren and Gu Tianju. One of the fans was very surprised and asked what the Gu family representatives had forgotten here. He laughed and said that the head was wondering if he really invited them. He doesn't want to admit how long they will last, but he would watch them die. The guys have already begun to enter the arena. This man left everything to the Mo brothers since this is an unconditional victory. The guy asked his brother if this was the Gu family. He wondered what had happened that even they came here. The brother responded by asking why they were screaming like girls, and that in the arena of death, one must be ready to give up one's life. Victory deserves such a price. They have been on the verge of death so many times that they are not afraid of anything. The spoiled kids should regret their decision. Gu Tianren told her brother that they looked strong. She was very worried about her brother. Gu Tianju asked his sister not to be afraid because the master helped them, so victory should be easy. And now the carnage had already begun. The man began to use an elusive flame. There was a strong flash and the guy asked if he wanted to beat him in agility. Gu Tianju was very surprised and his gaze fell on his opponent. He noticed that he seemed to have supersonic speed. The look was very stern and insidious. The man raised his eyebrows to his nose. Gu Tianju thought that he had a very strong opponent and the games were already over. The battle burned brighter and brighter and the fiery flames rose higher and higher. The opponent exclaimed while looking at Gu Tianju that his movements were unprofessional. He began to use the technique, and Gu Tianju thought that he could not see anything after this blow. The man began to use his new blade against him and the boy screamed in pain. Gu Tianren was very worried about her brother and began to call him, blushing with worry. The enemy began to use a stone attack against the girl and asked her to think better about herself. Viewers noticed that these brother and sister did not shine at all and fought weakly with their enemies. But one of the fans asked to cut off his legs and get his reward. The second exclaimed that the girl was pretty and looked good. The man who was sitting next to Li Jiang said that they were bad students and why they agreed to the fight. He clearly lost. The man with the sword in his hands told the major that his song was over and his blade was poisonous. He asked him not to worry and promised to take care of his little sister. Gu Tianju held his hand on the asphalt and told his opponent that if he were in his place, he would not be so confident. Then the enemy asked what he was mumbling about now. The boy replied that thanks to the master, he became a different person. He began to use a new ignition technique and directed all his power towards the enemy. A strong outbreak occurred and the fire ignited, rising higher and higher. The man asked why he was still moving and still not poisoned. Gu Tianju explained that scorched poison from the black market would not take him so easily. He thought to himself that his flame was so elusive that the toxins entering the body did not have time to cause harm. He was grateful to his master for his kindness. The spectators began to shout that they had lost everything. These two idiots had robbed him of everything. Another man asked when these rich people became strong, relying on the high odds. He bet on the Gu family and won. The sister approached her master and asked if they were smart. Li Jian responded by crossing his arms and saying that he had nothing positive to say. Gu Tianju apologized to the master and said that they had failed him, but it was simply impressive. If they put in even more effort, they will reach a completely different level. The guys exclaimed that they would work tirelessly. Unexpectedly, a man congratulated Mrs. Gu and Mr. Gu for winning the competition. It was the head of the establishment, and he said that their performance was something amazing. Their control over superpowers was so perfect that even he had a desire to take part. Gu Tianju asked the gentleman not to bother with pleasantries. The head asked Mr. Gu not to worry because he would fulfill his promise. However, the fighter with the red bracelet challenged Mr. Li to a fight. For this reason, he is forced to postpone the case. Gu Tianju replied to Mr. Xiangnan that they had fulfilled their part of the deal and took part in a duel to the death. Why are they sending Mr. Li to the arena? The head replied that these were the rules of the Black Raven. An opponent with a red bracelet has the right to challenge anyone present. Otherwise, he will be banned from entering for life. He will not be able to explain to his superiors why he violated the rules. On the other hand, it seems like a favor to Mr. Li. The boy replied that he would accept this fight. There is little chance that they will be able to implement their plans. They rely on the will of fate. The guys told their master that they would be watching their battle very closely and wished him good luck. Li Jian had to undergo testing after he put on his bracelet. The boy thought that this was a magical weapon for suppressing cultivation and that it was a very good device. One of the guys behind the monitor said that it was very strange that the young man's strength was an order of magnitude above average. He is not a cheater, and he cannot detect any other abilities. He wondered who he was. But the second partner told the guy to score because the guy would die in the arena anyway. He saw his ability level 9, and he figured out that his opponent was a blood demon. When the boy found himself near the gate, and they asked him to go through and not be at all shy, dear spectators were asked to look forward to their next fight. And now the show is about to begin. Their next new fighter named Li Jian. He enters the arena of death for the first time, and his opponent was already one step away from death more than once. He is the strongest among the red bracelets in their city and on their territory. Luoshan was a very strong and healthy opponent. He was a blood demon. The spectators asked to kick the butt of this pale-faced man. They bet everything on Mr. Shan. The man approached the boy and exclaimed that they had met again. He told him that they were still glowing. And so the battle was declared open. The man wanted to see the boy's strength. Li Jian thought that the blood would have exploded in his body if the bracelet had not interfered with him. He would have shattered into pieces throughout the arena. Has he really gone on the defensive and how long will he last? The man was very confident. Li Jian stood completely enveloped in golden light. He was ready to repel the attack. He began to use the linear blade technique, the second style, against his opponent. The boy began to use his technique without any fear of the enemy. He was already approaching with a new attack against him. Li Jian noticed that the man controlled the stones and his abilities were impressive. He threw these stones as high as possible, and everything around glowed with a bright red light. His abilities were truly impressive, and the boy was already approaching his opponent, repelling the attack. A bright yellow column pierced straight into the man's stomach and he flew far back. Shan slammed directly into the wall, breaking it into small fragments so that stones scattered around. The guys asked Mr. Shan to get up. They asked if he was okay and why the newcomer was kicking his butt. The fans asked the man to kill his opponent as soon as possible. Shan told Li Jian that he admitted that he had underestimated him, but he clenched his fist as tightly as possible and began to rise from the asphalt. He lifted a huge piece of stone as high as possible and prepared to throw it towards the boy. Li Jian placed the block in front of him in the form of a bright yellow fireball. He stopped this huge stone flying towards him with one movement of his hand with a glowing golden light. The enemy's stones began to scatter into small fragments in different directions, falling to the ground. Li Jian thought that in a short period of time, he had figured out how to best penetrate his defense despite his meager abilities. Shan asked why he doubted him because he is the strongest red bracelet. He is the invincible king of the blood demon arena. The man promised to use the blood he had shed and threw a sharp stone in his direction. Li Jian became wary and looked at him. A powerful blood-red explosion occurred right next to the boy. The guys were very worried about their brother and began to call the gentleman. The man laughed and told Mr. Xiannan that he gave him credit and that the game was mind-blowing. The boy's brains scattered throughout the arena, and there is nothing more interesting than battles to the death. Gu Tianju grabbed his head and exclaimed that the master could not survive. If he had not taken him to the arena, nothing would have happened, and how will he explain this to his grandfather? The sister asked her brother not to worry. She was sure that everything would be fine with the gentleman. The man could not understand why the victory signal did not sound. Li Jian approached his opponent and said that he was more interesting than he thought. Shan was simply shocked and could not understand how he survived. The boy said that another enemy would probably have died under his attack. But unfortunately, he is his opponent. The man began to approach the boy with a clenched fist and noticed that he had blood on his face and would not be able to beat him. He approached his opponent as quickly as possible and wanted to strike. But the boy had already managed to attack him, and the man thought that his strength had disappeared somewhere. Li Jian exclaimed as he approached him with a blow that the time had finally come, and he began to use the Jiaoxu blade. He directed all his abilities against the enemy and he fell on his back from the boy's power. He flew far back and began coughing up scarlet streams of blood. The man fell to the floor, hitting his head on the stones, and many small stones scattered around. The spectators could not understand what it was and why Mr. Shan fell. After all bets were placed on him. The results were obvious, and the winner of today's mortal battle is Li Jian. The boy thought that for a moment he regained the feeling that he was fighting to the death. Now he needed to go to the ruins. The spectators were simply shocked that Mr. Shan lost. They bet all their money on him. One of the guys asked what the name of the guy who won was. And another star has lit up in the arena of death, and you need to follow the news to be the first to know about exciting events. One of the guys harbored a grudge against Li Jian and said that he would die soon. Gu Tianren ran to the boy and said that she was scared to death. But it's good that he's okay. He is so powerful that even the red bracelet could not defeat him. She admires him, and she would never stand against him. Li Jian replied that they would rise to his level in the future. Gu Tianju said that he would work tirelessly. Li Jian thought that Luo Shan's skills were worthy of praise. After fighting him, his body's defenses had improved significantly. The man said that Mr. Li is simply incomparable, and how he managed to defeat the strongest fighter among the red bracelets. The boy asked Mr. Xiang if he was really trying to pretend that he didn't owe them. The head replied that of course not, and he promised to take them to where he said. He led the guys to a long staircase into the basement and asked them to follow him down. The guys began to descend into the room faster and faster, approaching their goal. The head apologized and asked why they wanted to visit this place. Gu Tianju replied that the gentleman had personal reasons for this. He should refrain from asking unnecessary questions. The man explained that he was not exaggerating when he said that anyone who enters there is doomed to death. His little Xiang Ying fell into a coma after this. He spent an incredible amount of money on doctors, but to no avail. And he, Mr. Li Jian, could build a career in the arena. It would be a shame if something happened to him. The boy replied to the head that his daughter was fine. The man could not understand what the gentleman had just said. He became wary and froze in bewilderment. He looked towards his daughter and began making phone calls. The man told Mr. Xiannan that the lady came to her senses and she came out of the coma. The man could not understand how he knew this, and it is simply incomprehensible to the mind. Did he really save his girl? Li Jian said that he knows where to go, and they don't have to bother themselves. He advised the man to better visit his daughter. He is forced to leave now, but expresses great gratitude to him and will never forget his kindness. Gu Tianren asked her brother how the boy found out what happened to the arena owner's daughter and whether he saved her. Gu Tianju replied that Mr. Li's magic was beyond their understanding. Meanwhile, the man who was beaten by Li Jian was very angry with his opponent. He called him dead. But the doctor asked Mr. Shan not to move because his wounds had not yet healed. They realized that they had a common enemy. This was said by the guy who suddenly appeared on the doorstep. He took off his cap from his head and, showing his face, asked if they were against joining forces. The guys walked along a creepy gray street, somewhere under the death arena behind the ruins of an immortal cultivator. Gu Tianren walked deeper into the darkness and said that the smell here was very bad. Gu Tianju felt that there were signs of a struggle nearby, and it was quite terrible. Perhaps the gentleman was already here. Li Jian thought that the soul-stealing system had not been deployed outside the ruins. We need to go even further. He put his hand in front of him, and a yellow ring formed on the wall. A barrier was installed at the entrance so that no one would disturb the owner of the tomb. It turns out that by following him you can gain a lot of useful knowledge. This is what the boys said to their master. The monster opened its mouth and began to ask for food. Li Jian asked if he wanted to swallow it. He began to look at him with a bright red gaze, burning right through him. The skulls opened their bony mouths. The boy gave the command forward, and everything around him glowed with a bright scarlet haze. Gu Tianju was very surprised because the boy killed him with just one look. My sister was also very surprised. They watched what was happening, rejoicing that they had such a strong and brave master. Li Jian's opponent said that during the years spent in the arena, he had seen everyone, but he did not know about this place. Who is this guy anyway? His comrade replied that he didn't care who he was, because he would die here anyway, and it was time to bring out his trump cards. This guy had level 9 abilities and unknown strength. The second one also had level 9 abilities with unknown strength. The guys were preparing for the attack and began to slowly take out their blue abilities. Meanwhile, deep in the ruins, there were many skulls lying on the floor. The guys moved forward deeper and deeper. Gu Tianren said that the further they go, the more pungent the smell becomes. Li Jian thought that this girl's sensitivity to spiritual power was amazing. She certainly has a great future ahead of her. Gu Tianju asked the gentleman if everything was okay. He asked the guys to be quiet. They hid behind a high rock and began to watch the blue smoke in the form of faces with teeth. They couldn't figure out what it was. Li Jian explained that ancient cultivators often used ghosts as guards. He told his guys that they could move on, and they began to move towards the exit of the cave. But before that, they arrived at one room and began to look at what was inside. Gu Tianju noticed that there were a lot of magical weapons here. My sister asked who lived here before. They noticed in front of them a huge chest glowing red and yellow gold. Someone began to call for help and ask for release. Gu Tianren began to approach this chest. Some kind of demon came out of it in the form of a red bright flame with white eyes. Gu Tianju began to worry about his sister and called her with a frightened glance in her direction. The girl was all shackled and asked the monster to let her go immediately. Well, the monster began to scream that this body was his and was not going to let go of the girl. Li Jian put his hand forward and began to use his abilities against the one who captured the girl. Gu Tianju caught his sister and asked if she was okay. Gu Tianren asked her brother what happened. Li Jian realized that it was a jade pendant, and he suspected such things. Blood sects use these, so that means they are dealing with one of his representatives. And why do the same sects exist in this world and in his? However, the path to Taoism is laid through 3,000 worlds. Maybe for this reason the name and items are the same. The ancient relics are imbued with great spiritual energy, and he thinks that he is already close. The boy glanced to the side, sensing some kind of danger. The stones began to scatter in different directions from a powerful explosion next to them. Sean appeared in front of them and told the boy that this was not an arena and he would not hold back. Li Jian stopped his comrades by covering them with protection and asked them to stand here. The man exclaimed, looking at his opponent, that he was experiencing great despair. The enemy ran up to the boy and, screaming die, began to use all his abilities against him. Many red stones flew towards Li Jian. All he had time to do was dodge them. One of the blood-red stones fell to the ground right in front of the boy, glowing a dirty, bloody color. Li Jian began to direct all his strength against this stone, and it began to shatter into small fragments. Gu Tianju said that only because he lost in the arena of death, this freak gathered his minions to deal with the master, and what shamelessness this is. Gu Tianren told her brother to deal with a mid-level master and 2 9th-rank masters. Li Jian thought to himself that without a magic weapon, he demonstrated average skills. But he broke through the defense without difficulty. Moreover, he has an advantage in superpowers. This is a worthy opponent for his peak strength. The boy began to put 2 fingers in front of him and they glowed with a bright golden light. The battle will awaken the true energy in him. This is a big leap forward for its improvement. Li Jian began to approach his opponent, striking him with bright golden lightning. The man began to cover himself with both hands and thought about what kind of childish tricks this boy had. He called him worthless and began to fight off the attacks of this boy. Again, many stones flew towards Li Jian. They were very sharp and glowed with a fiery red color. Li Jian thought that when blood clots, spiritual power accumulates inside, which leads to an explosion, and apparently this is his trump card. The boy began to use the linear sword technique, the fourth style of destruction. One of the men started shouting and pointing his hand up. Li Jian realized that it was a bait. His physique resembles that of a forest spirit, capable of healing himself. Li Jian was behind this fat man. Sharp red stones came out of the man's back. They began to grow and rise higher and higher, threatening to prick with their peaks. The guy looked around the corner and thought that Li Jian had brought trouble upon himself. The guy said that a fighter capable of self-healing can give endless blood, while another uses it as a weapon. Did they really reach that high rank? Gu Tianren began to worry that her brother was in danger. Li Jian again began to use the linear sword technique, the fifth style, namely moonlight. The man approached his friend and asked him if he was still alive. He said that this carcass can heal all the time, but it cannot grow brains. Such are the costs of superpower. His blood and body are weapons for him, and how long does he think he will hold out? The boy replied that if this is all he is capable of, then he overestimated him. He began to use the sharp long sword Jiao Sui, a single force against his opponent. He jumped over his opponent and ended up on the other side of him from behind. The man clenched his fists and screaming "Die" began to approach the boy. But Li Jian was very dexterous, and with one movement of his sword, he threw the enemy directly onto the stones. He found himself near him, and the tip of the sword was near the man's throat. Scarlet streams of blood flowed down the cold blade. The boy put this sword directly to the throat of his opponent, and he growled in bewilderment. He started laughing and said that without the restraint bracelets, he could explode like a volcano and attack with lava. Does he really think he can escape from him? But before the enemy could finish speaking, his gaze changed. He could not understand how the power of his blood disappeared as soon as one approached him. Li Jian raised his sharp sword above his opponent's head and exclaimed that it was time to finish. But before he could lower the sword towards his enemy, he heard some noise next to his ear. The boy dodged in time because the bullet flew towards him and hit the blade of the sword. Li Jian dodged in time and another bullet flew past his head, almost hitting him. The man began to hide behind his comrade, who was like a weapon to him. Li Jian got down on one knee and stuck his sharp sword directly into the stones. The guy stood behind him and asked if he thought that it only helps him regenerate blood. Gas, heat, and even electricity. Everything in this world can be useful for him. The warhead was produced using super powerful current. In other words, it will penetrate any matter. He is his biggest trump card. The man asked the boy to admit that he had already lost. But Li Jian realized something very important and, looking into his eyes, decided what he would do next. He snapped 2 fingers, and his 3-headed dog appeared in front of him. He decided to make it clear to them once and for all who he was. The 3-headed dogs began to spew hellfire from their huge, ominous mouths. The guy was surprised that this schoolboy could summon high-ranking beasts and pointed a cannon at him. A bright red volley of fire flew towards the enemy, and a huge block of ice appeared in front of him. The man exclaimed that the ice wall would not help. He controls the elements and can freeze him. The guy exclaimed that this is an unusual fire and he cannot freeze it. The man asked to cover him and threatened to kill the brat. His partner began to howl. The man began to approach the 3-headed beast, but it had already eaten his partner. After that, he began to approach him, and the partner was completely bloodied and began to fall on the stones. Shan began to shield himself with his hands from the fiery volley of the 3-headed beast that was approaching him. The monster began to growl more and more, opening its huge fanged mouth. The man was frightened, glancing at this beast and moving his eyebrows to his nose and moved to the side. He began to fly far back, spreading his arms wide and falling onto the cold, healthy stones. The bullet again flew towards the boy and almost hit his head. But Li Jian was very brave and dexterous. He again dodged a bullet flying towards him. The man began to approach his opponent and exclaimed that this time he had hit. But many volleys of incredible power began to hit his body, turning him over to the ground. Li Jian pointed his finger towards the exit and asked his opponent to disappear immediately. Shan's assistant pointed his weapon towards the boy and approached him as quickly as possible. Well, what happened, and did he really not cope with his power? The guy's mask was already lying on the floor. His superpower is similar to celestial control of the 5 elements. This is a common modified spell, but you should be careful with it. And self-regeneration consists of using spiritual energy inside the body, and sooner or later the reserves will run out. The man noticed that even his partner had nothing healed on his body, but he always healed himself. Shan, looking at the boy, asked what he was. Li Jian replied that this was not the information he needed. Then the man began to approach him and exclaimed that even though he would die, he would take him with him. His face changed and began to become covered with sharp, eerie stones as he approached his opponent. There was a huge explosion and the yellow fire rose very high, burning stronger and stronger. The three-headed dog began to approach his opponents and stop behind his owner. Meanwhile, the guys had already run to their brother and asked if he was okay. Are they all dead? And it was very surprising. But the boy closed his eyes and told his comrades that there was one more left. He put his hand to the side and began to use force, after which a strong explosion occurred. Dongfang Yuanshuo appeared in front of them. He fell to the ground after being hit by Li Jian. Dongfang Yuanshuo abruptly fell to his knees in front of the boy and exclaimed that he was terribly guilty and he should not have interfered with him and Ziqi. He promised to do whatever Li Jian asked. He will even be his dog, only asking him not to kill. He constantly asked for mercy. The boy left him sitting on the rocks and left. The guy exclaimed that he was happy and thanked Li Jian for saving his life. Gu Tianren asked why brother let him go. Gu Tianju replied that the gentleman has a good heart, but it is possible that he will do something in the future. As Dongfang Yuanshuo ran away, he thought that he was a big fool for allowing him to leave. Someday he will pay for his kindness. But before he had time to think through this thought to the end, many ghostly hands reached out in his direction. They began to approach the boy and envelop him in ominous green energy. The guy began to scream, seriously frightened. Gu Tianju said that villains always get what they deserve. The gentleman simply did not want to get his hands dirty. The guys began to move over the stones and approach their master. They all approached the boy, who was standing in front of a statue that had a sword stuck into its forehead. It was a statue of a mountain ram, and a sharp, heavy sword was right in his forehead. Li Jian thought that without them, he would have had to make more efforts to find this place. And this was an unexpected surprise. This sword is forged from a meteorite crystal. Even in this condition, it is incredibly valuable. The boy took the hilt of the sword in his hands, but thought that he had not come for him. When he pulled the sword out of the ram's head, streams of scarlet blood began to flow out of the hole. The boy was completely shrouded in a bloody haze and veil from this ram. Rivers of blood began to flow from his eyes and the hole in his forehead, which enveloped Li Jian. The guys approached the gentleman. Gu Tianren was very surprised at how much blood there was. Maybe it was a trap, and they asked the gentleman to be careful. Li Jian told his boys that they themselves would have to deal with the remaining magical weapons in the ruins. Gu Tianju wanted to answer the master, but his gaze fell on the boy's legs, which were already stepping into a pool of blood. He completely dived headlong into this blood-red thicket. The girl exclaimed that her brother jumped right there and asked if it was dangerous. Gu Tianju asked her not to worry because the master has everything under control. At least that's how it should be. Li Jian began to fall into this scarlet thicket, and when he passed through it, he found himself in another dimension. Boiling bloody soul, secret realm of the spiritual eye. He began to run towards danger. The boy realized that the spiritual eye is the center of the creation of the world. It releases all the spiritual energy in the world, and it is a secret place in ruins. Surprisingly, the spiritual energy of the kingdom is not as strong as he imagined. He directed all his strength and energy towards the snow-white flower, and the flower was enveloped in yellow-golden light. The boy took it in his hands, realizing that this flower grows only in places abounding in energy. But due to a shortage here, it stopped blooming. So where is the eye now? The petals of this flower began to scatter in different directions, falling straight onto the cold ground. The boy began to move further and, hiding behind a huge stone, looked forward. Li Jian noticed that someone had placed a seal on the flow of spiritual energy. He came closer, and touching the seal with his hand, asked what kind of power this man had. Then the boy stood up and felt incredible energy near him. There was a square drawn around it, and in the middle there was a huge circle with different symbols inside. A paw appeared in a blue transparent haze, and an animal appeared in front of him. It was an incarnate beast of the 9th level of Qi refinement. The beast said that those who invade the Forbidden Lands must die. The boy noticed while looking at this monster that it was level 9, and its intelligence was very developed. Li Jian asked the monster who he served, but he continued to say that those who invade the Forbidden Lands must die. He jumped into a high jump and exclaimed that he would certainly pay for this. Li Jian realized that this beast was not advanced enough to communicate. Its owner most likely sealed the energy, but he just wonders why. However, the aura of the seal shows that it can be removed. In front of him was the true Tao body. The boy decided to cleanse this beast. He performed many different rituals and found himself behind the back of this formidable beast. Li Jian threw a bright golden sword in his direction and gave the command to cut it. The beast shone with bright golden rays, and the lunar path appeared in front of it. He wriggled in the golden light and began to growl in pain, spewing bloody flames. The beast began to call the boy a trespasser, slowly dying. But he did not stop repeating that border violators must certainly die. Li Jian began to use the Linny Blade technique from the second style and prepared to attack. He pulled out his cold, long sword and swung it right in front of the mighty beast. The boy began to use the strangulation technique, and the shackles on the beast's neck scattered in different directions. He immediately fell to the ground with a crash, turning upside down. Li Jian approached him as close as possible and gave him a disdainful look. Foam began to flow from the beast's mouth. The boy thought about it. Now he showed his true face. The beast began to transform and long ropes stretched out from its paws like snakes. He said that death awaits violators and began to envelop the boy with these paws. Li Jian, without thinking twice, cut his paws into many small pieces and looked menacingly towards the enemy. He rose into the air and, looking at the beast, noticed that it was much stronger than him. The monster had many slits from which red eyes glowed as if alive. The boy thought that this was both a risk and an opportunity for him. The world's cultivators are based either in the sky or on the earth, and people go from the highest to the lowest. There is a colossal difference between them, and the influence of cultivators is priceless. Earth cultivators are already considered the strongest craftsmen. Cultivators of the sky exist only by word of mouth. In a past life, he traveled all over the world and found one interesting technique of the highest level: earth waves. Cultivating a technique requires pure, true spiritual power. Fortunately, the teacher then helped him in this matter. The boy clenched his sword and began to dodge the attack of a formidable evil monster approaching him. Now, the spiritual energy is so discharged that it is very difficult and almost impossible to advance in the waves of the earth. They say nothing in the world is perfect, but will he be able to cultivate like in his previous life? No matter how thorny and dangerous the path was, he will never retreat, and today he will achieve it. The boy decided not to take a single step back and moved forward towards the danger approaching him. He made a cut on the forehead of this monster and thought that the seal with the soul was connected by one source. If you hurt your soul, the seal will weaken. The body absorbs the power of the seal. He will break into pieces, but he will use what he intended. He still wants to achieve cultivation. Li Jian found himself next to the monster. He began to use a row of earth and the greatest power of the wind. He asked them to incarnate. The boy jumped as high as possible above the enemy's head and dealt him a powerful blow. He held 2 fingers in front of him and asked the Zanpakuto to pierce his soul. He approached the monster and poked it in the forehead with 2 fingers. The boy gave a signal to the rift. He jumped over the monster's head and it sparkled with bright red lightning. Li Jian tried to dodge the blood race. He dodged very quickly and deftly. Having made a high jump, he began to approach the monster and exclaimed that today nothing would stop him. He asked the sword to sprinkle the air with blood and cut thousands of bones with the blade. The boy began to approach the enemy and was already very close to his forehead. His sword stuck into the monster's head, and he made another cut with the bladed weapon. The monster began to scream and writhe in pain, and again many red fiery rays approached the boy. Before him was the Eye of Retribution. Many red bloody eyes enveloped Li Jian. He commanded his sword to move back and cast his gaze ahead of him. A powerful explosion occurred and bloody rays scattered from the monster in all directions. The monster fell to its knees and, shrouded in a red haze, white transparent smoke emanated from it. This monster had many eyes both on its face and throughout its body, and they glowed with a bright red light. He stood indestructible and looked ahead. Clouds of smoke enveloped him. Li Jian began to approach the monster again, rising higher and higher into the sky. The boy glowed with a golden light, and this color began to envelop the enemy. He asked not to destroy, not to stand, not to cause harm, and not to open. Cultivation of the land has been started. The monster began to scream louder and louder, and its many red eyes glowed with a fiery color. He clenched his terrible paws and began to approach his opponent with a roar. The cultivation stage is a fast-moving technique. Li Jian began to approach the monster faster and faster. He put his fingers forward and began to use the linear blade technique, the first style. After this, the boy used an ice mirror and many ice blocks grew around him. The monster again began to release bright fiery rays from its body, which were already approaching the enemy. Li Jian managed to dodge them without being the least bit afraid, and being completely confident in himself. The boy once again dodged the formidable monster and, without releasing his blade, began to wave it in front of the beast. The blade glowed with a bright golden light, completely wrapped in it. Li Jian began to use the power of the second style Juexu blade. His gaze was imperturbable. There was a column of guys in front of the beast. It was as if Li Jian had been cloned and there was a lot of him. A whole army of guys held weapons in their hands and approached the evil monster faster and faster. The beast did not expect such a turn of events, and did not have time to dodge the golden rays flying towards him. He flew into the air and began to scream as he was enveloped in bright yellow flames. The boy thought that he didn't know who made him a guard, but thanks to him he achieved the earthwave technique. And he dares to suggest that this force is much more powerful than the previous one, and what really is the reason. Only questions and no answers. But someday he decided to find out everything. The eye will give him a huge amount of energy, and he believes that he will soon regain his strength. Meanwhile, Gu Tianren was talking about how the pleasant smell had become much stronger. Gu Tianju replied that he also felt that something had changed. The guys decided that this had something to do with the gentleman. Meanwhile, the old man was sitting at the table and drinking a cup of sweet, delicious tea. He was in his wheelchair and reading notes in his book. The old man looked into the distance in front of him and said that the Gu family had been waiting for this day. Before us is Dongfang Yuan, the head of the Dongfang family. He told Mr. G that he was a young man with great talent and had achieved a lot at such a young age. Yuan Shuo should follow his example. The man replied that he was a very kind Mr. Dongfang. Ji Xuan said that his family has an influential reputation in the field of drug research and development, and he's looking forward to working with him for as long as possible. Dongfang Yuan suddenly got up from his chair and apologized to the boy and got in touch. Ji Xuan told the man that everything was fine. He in turn asked over the phone for an explanation. The man replied that he had bad news. The indicator installed on the young gentleman's body stopped transmitting a signal, and he said that he was dead. Dongfang Yuan replied that he understood him and hung up. Ji Xuan wondered if something had happened. The man calmly replied that dogs caused a lot of trouble, and he had already sent a subordinate to sort it out. Their business is much more important, and besides, the Dongfang family will prepare the goods in the form they want as quickly as possible. The man told Brother D that he would just leave to pick them up. The boy asked him to be so kind. The man in turn began to walk out the door and gritting his teeth thought that Gu Wen had killed his son. He was very angry and decided that he would kill them all as soon as the Dongfang family became part of the organization. And now, several days have passed. Li Jian sat in the lotus position with his eyes closed. He rose high above some bright purple ball that was spinning in the air, and in front of him was a large chest, which was shrouded in blue haze. A long, soft tail protruded from this chest. Suddenly, the chest began to move. The cat began to crawl out of it, and purring joyfully, she exclaimed that she was finally free. The cat approached the boy and looked at him with interest. She began to meow gently. She came as close to him as possible and began to look at Li Jian, who was sitting in the lotus position. She thought that this was a heavenly-level Taoist in front of her. Was she delusional? The cat decided that she too would be so talented. I wouldn't know about cat problems. The boy gave her a strange look. Then he closed his eyes again and a small explosion occurred next to the cat. The cat became quiet and asked why he started fighting. She exclaimed that she would forgive him if he apologized. Li Jian replied that the amount of spiritual energy his body could absorb was running out. If he wants to continue practicing, it will still take some time to purify the spiritual energy in his body to its true essence. If he can compete with an opponent of the same strength, then the transformation of true energy will be more effective and half as much effort will be spent. The cat asked if he listens to her at all. She called herself the Cat of Omen. Li Jian asked if she was a cat that could see into the heavens themselves. The cat replied that it was so and that she was very popular. The boy asked how she got through the barrier. The cat meowed and said that she didn't know. She was grabbed and shoved into this rotten box, and when she woke up, she was already here. Li Jian said that she doesn't even know how she ended up here. Therefore, he has no desire to get involved with her. The cat got a little angry and began to slowly approach the boy. She asked him to wait a little, and then she would become much bigger. The cat approached the boy and hugged him and said in his ear that Taoists do not know how to lie. She said that cats were beautiful and useful, and asked if he would allow her to become his companion. So what if he's a heavenly-level cultivator after all? Her cultivation is at an average level. This means she hasn't forgotten the basic skills yet. The boy gave her a contemptuous look and asked her to get lost. The cat, who turned into a girl, began to rise higher and higher. She fell to the ground and became seriously angry. The cat released its claws and cast an angry glance at the boy. The girl said that the kitty never makes a mistake in her choice. Her eyes were cunning and sinister. She said that he was a true Taoist, and she decided so. The girl's eyes were truly cat-like and radiated an incredible blue. Li Jian glanced at her with interest and suddenly remembered something. Feelings of failure and overcoming adversity are not good, and it was Bai Shu in front of him. Well, no matter how much he trains, it is impossible to escape from fate. As long as he's on her side, she will help him survive his troubles. The girl extended her hand towards the boy and looked tenderly into his eyes. The boy sat on the ground holding out his hand in response. He had his eyes closed. Li Jian approached the girl and asked if she thought the illusion would work on him. He grabbed the girl by the ear and she asked to let her go, considering herself guilty. She said that the kitty should not contradict the elders and asked permission to be with him. The boy asked the girl to help him survive the disaster, and he would help her live longer. Meanwhile, Gu Tianren was sitting in the lotus position opposite her little brother. The girl closed her eyes and meditated with her hands on her knees. Gu Tianju asked his sister why her strength had become greater. The girl replied that she didn't know, but it seemed to her that meditation gave her energy. The boy was seriously surprised and thought that his sister was really a genius and he was just a loser. Suddenly, a head with huge horns lit up in front of them in a bright red color. They couldn't understand what it was. Gu Tianren said that little brother has returned, but he's not alone. The guys noticed that there were two of them. Gu Tianju asked his friend who the lady was. The girl replied that she was Shui Yu, the companion of the Taoist kitty. Gu Tianren thought to herself that they would not say that this is what she was thinking about. Kitty said that their food is simply delicious. Gu Tianren wondered if this woman was a Taoist companion of her brother. There has been a surge of spiritual energy nearby, but Li Jian's cultivation is making progress. We need to find the eye as soon as possible. Gu Tianren told her brother that she had reached the 4th level and asked him to praise her. The boy replied to keep it that way. Li Jian asked what Gu Tianju had. The guy grabbed his head with his hand and replied that he was still working, but he thought everything would work out soon. He asked if the gentleman had heard about what happened to Dongfang Yuan Shuo. They are worried that they will take it out on Miss Ziqi and Miss Liu. After all, they are related to the Gu family. Li Jian answered the boy that there was no point in worrying and everything would be fine. Meanwhile, the man was telling another on the roof of the building that he had already told him that the one they were looking for was not here. But the killer, clenching his fists, replied that this was a lie. He is a professional and he will not deceive him. Then the boy's bodyguard said that he didn't understand in words. Then he would explain it to him with his fists. But the killer decided to demonstrate his abilities to him and went to meet him with a weapon. He took the sharp blade and exclaimed that his blade would certainly pierce him. Li Jian's bodyguard took out a powerful weapon and pointed it towards the enemy. The killer exclaimed that the task was completed. They have very similar strengths and even capabilities. The guy approached him, attacking, and said that even in this case, he was still better than him. The killer began to use a shining blade and directed all his power against the enemy. The bodyguard grimaced and realized that the wound would not heal for a long time due to his metal. And he rose as high as possible into the air and, having made the jump, exclaimed that he was celebrating early. The killer asked him to shut up and said that he was the best killer. He began to use blade concussion. The bodyguard got ready and put on the chainmail without letting go of the weapon. Kisa, looking at what was happening from the other roof, said that it was worth dozing off for a while. But here the massacre was already in full swing. What is this superpower that is similar to magic but more complicated? The big guy seems about to be killed. The kitty girl asked if he wanted to help him. Li Jian replied that there was no need. Since ancient times, battles were fought to the death. Only a select few could achieve something. Kisa noticed that he was completely insensitive. Li Jian explained to her that if she could not defeat opponents of equal strength, then she had no right to follow him. The killer found himself opposite his opponent and, raising his sword high, said that it was useless to defend himself. The bodyguard sat on the ground, coughing heavily. He closed his eyes and curled his face into a malicious smile. The killer again began to approach his opponent without letting go of his sword. The bodyguard, without getting up from the ground, began to remember how his mother called him by name. She put her hand on his head and asked Xiao Gu if he was secretly reading novels again. The son answered his mother that the people who wrote this were simply amazing, and he wanted it that way too. The mother answered her son that a person becomes strong by trying to protect the most valuable thing he has. Perseverance in everything is the real key to success. The son told his mother that he understood her. The boy grabbed his weapon and, squeezing it in his hand, raised it up. It glowed with a golden light. The man exclaimed that he wanted to become stronger and began to rise from his knees. The killer was very surprised and asked if the corrosion had failed. The boy began to approach him with an attack, but the bodyguard was already getting to his feet. 10th level Fury of Metal, Ancient Lichen. The guy stood up and clenched his fists and looked at his opponent. He was very serious and was not going to take a step back. He cast an angry glance at his enemy. The killer could not understand what it was and how his hand grew back. The metal is also different now. Xiao Gu began to approach his opponent faster and faster, inviting him to bite his fist. A bright yellow light glowed from his hand and began to knock the enemy onto his back. The killer began to scream, completely enveloped in bright golden flames. He flew far back and began to fall on his back. There was a huge explosion and he found himself near the wall. The guy sat with torn clothes and asked the bodyguard why they were burning his clothes. Xiao Gu responded by asking him not to play the fool, but rather to follow the battle as closely as possible. Li Jian, watching from the side, told the kitty that it was all over. The bodyguard noticed Mr. Li Jian behind him and was very happy to see him. The boy was congratulated by the bodyguard on reaching the 10th level. He saw everything and said that Xiao Gu did a good job. He promised to teach him some training methods later. Xiao Gu said that without his bracelet, his inner strength would never have been released. He thought to himself that the gentleman had paid attention to him and that he was very kind. Li Jian said that he would do the rest himself, and he began to approach the guy lying near the wall. The killer looked at him and said that he was a pro and would rather die than tell anything. The boy gave the command to the cat Shui Yu to talk to this comrade, and she jumped in his direction. The cat turned into a girl and began to approach the enemy very gently and quietly. She stroked her cheek with her hand and said that she would do this with great pleasure. The killer suddenly opened his eyes and was very surprised by something. He asked if he shouldn't be on a mission and asked where he was. The girl's legs were near his face and she asked if he knew this. Aunt May was in the bathroom next to the boy and told him that he was in heaven. She's here to reward him. Then the boy asked Aunt May if she had not gone abroad and what she was doing here. The girl replied that he is very professional at intimidating and luring enemies into a trap. Without him, it would be difficult for them to kill Li Jian. Then the killer asked if he was dead. The girl replied that it was all thanks to him, and whether he thought a good boy deserved a reward. The guy exclaimed that he owes his professionalism to his leadership. It was they who made him #1 among killers. Solving problems is his main duty, and he does not dare ask for any reward. He is obliged to do everything for the prosperity of his organization. The girl exclaimed that he was a real pro. The guy asked his aunt what she was up to and said that he was an exemplary assassin, and he couldn't do that. The woman exclaimed that his body is much more honest than him, and deep down he wants her. But the guy answered his aunt that she was mistaken and he treated her like a mother. The woman asked him to make all his dreams come true and enjoy his last moments. The girl approached him as close as possible and said that this was his last moment. Her eyes lit up with an eerie cat's gaze and she hugged the boy to her. The guys approached him and realized that a specialist in this matter had worked here. The girl said that she thought he was amused. The bodyguard wondered what he saw before he died and why he died. Kisa said that the guy was sent by the Blackwater organization. There is a certain person named Aunt May, and she occupies a leadership position. The gang has nothing to do with the Dongfang family, so for what good reason did they order him? Li Jian asked her to go and find out. Before us is the city of Chenghe, the territory of the Blackwater gang. Men walked through the area with bags on their shoulders. One of them said that the purity of these crystals leaves much to be desired. The second one asked to score for the Moo family. It doesn't matter. But the main thing is the quantity. He wonders if anyone would notice if a couple of pebbles suddenly disappeared. The guys looked to the side and were very scared. A huge explosion occurred next to them. Xiao Gu clenched his fists and, approaching the guys, exclaimed that it was time to start cleaning. The man asked what he forgot in the Blackwater territory. They pointed at him. The second one asked to shoot this guy immediately and kill him. Kisa asked them to calm down. She asked about the weaklings if they could amuse her now and stood in front of them in all her glory. But the man with a weapon in his hands wished her death and began firing many shots. The girl said in response that she sees all the trajectories of the bullets, so he is trying in vain. A huge rocket was flying towards the girl, but she somehow didn't care, and she smiled sarcastically towards the enemy. The girl said that she was hungry, and she hoped that when the owner finished with his business, he would invite her to dinner. Meanwhile, the head of the gang, Blackwater Blind Snake with a low cultivation level, heard a noise. He asked the guy sitting on the chair why it was so noisy outside. Is the white tiger on the rampage again? Li Jian was already holding his blade in his hand and heading towards the gang leader. He abruptly stood up from his chair and, throwing a snake at the enemy, asked who was there. The boy sat down on one knee and, having cut the snake in half, asked if he had ordered it. The man was happy to meet Li Jiang, a high-level cultivator with dozens of kills to his name. The man crossed his arms over his chest and said that now it is clear why his best mercenary did not return alive. But he had so much audacity to show up to them once, but he had little left. The boy replied that he had come specifically for him, and that he should not have interfered with him. He swung his sword at the man, but the guy who was sitting in the chair suddenly stood up and blocked his blow. As it turns out, it was a girl. Li Jian noticed the final stage of cultivation and looked at this guy with an interesting look. The man said that he did not want to upset Madame Moo. The girl said that Aunt May is not here, so who runs the organization? Important negotiations will take place today, which must in no way be disrupted. Or who will be responsible for this to Aunt May? At the moment, she is the temporary head, and the success of their cooperation with them today depends on whether Madame Moo can support her. She is confident that she will make the right decision. The girl hoped that she kept her word. Li Jian said that she has enough ability to become an outstanding person, so why did she get involved in all this with him? The girl stood up to attack the boy and said that it was none of his business. Li Jian immediately repelled the attack, and many fragments flew to the floor with a loud ringing sound. No one dares to interfere with the Moo family's negotiations. Li Jian cast a questioning glance to the side. Some sinister force landed near Li Jian's leg. He managed to dodge in time. The boy asked if she had really revived this box that stood next to him. The box actually rose into the air and it had eyes. He began to approach the boy. The girl threw a contemptuous look at him and said that if he approached, she would regret that she was born. Li Jian smiled and exclaimed that this was very entertaining. He picked up his blade. The girl asked if he really decided to go after his chimeras with this broken blade. The boy asked the girl not to make him laugh. She began to use the flame of the atom. Li Jian pulled out his sword and began to use the Lingbu sword technique. The girl exclaimed that her fire melted metal, but could not cope with this stump. She couldn't understand what was happening. What could be stronger than her bright, fiery flame? The girl cast a questioning glance towards the boy and was very surprised. She suddenly found herself on a chair that she'd just revived. Did he really just cut his puppet apart? The girl realized that she had big problems. Li Jian grabbed his blade and, squeezing it in his hand, began to approach her faster and faster. The enemy decided that nothing was lost yet, and began to use her new abilities. She asked the boy not to underestimate her and began to attack Li Jian. The boy tried to dodge her attacks and lightning flashed under his feet. He realized that a firearm was stored in this box and jumped as far as possible from the explosions. The boy realized that this girl knows how to subjugate a large number of chimeras. He exclaimed that the good thing was that she had experience in the real world. When he dodged the attacks, he decided to take action himself. Li Jian began to approach his opponent and exclaimed that she had not yet reached his level. The man asked the lady to take care. A man appeared behind her and asked the boy who he was. Li Jian asked if this was her strong point as a manipulator. He remembered that last time he had a skirmish with the Tang clan. They seem to have abilities, but the difference is still noticeable. Perhaps the lack of spiritual energy in this world is the reason why people with superpowers are so common. The ability has just been upgraded. The girl admitted defeat and said that they could better discuss other matters. What they mentioned has nothing to do with her. The gang leader told Madame Moo that she couldn't just abandon him like that. Li Jian asked her to tell about the people behind her. Suddenly, the boy's legs began to be enveloped in a bright turquoise web. She was like the rays of Lazarus. The girl said that he very easily fell for her trick and began to use a sonic drill. She also used powerful turquoise nets, enveloping the boy in them. Li Jian thought that she was submissive in order for him to relax his caution. Another confirmation that no one can be trusted. Knowing that she wouldn't get close to him directly, she decided to shorten the distance. She aimed the threads at vital organs, and he thinks that he will not have time to attack. The gang leader asked Miss Moo why she was delaying and asked her to kill him. Then the girl asked if he really thought that she could kill him. Li Jian began to use the blade against the bright turquoise rays. The girl could not understand what was happening. Li Jian explained that he did not originally intend to kill her, but apparently he has no choice. The gang leader asked the girl to use her strength to the fullest. Then the girl asked if he seriously thought that she was from Blackwater. They were surprised by the strength of their opponent and could not understand how this was possible. Mrs. Moo asked the boy why he controls her chimera and how he succeeds. The leader asked the girl to move away and asked if she had another plan. He asked to finish off the boy quickly. Madame Moo thought that he was from an influential family, and it would be nice if they became partners. She told Li Jian that she was Mu Fei, the second daughter of the Moo family, and apologized for her ignorance. She hoped she didn't offend him. The boy asked if she was tired of fighting. The girl bowed before him and asked the gentleman to make himself at home. She promised to go for tea. The leader asked if she had forgotten their agreement. Moo in response asked if he really didn't understand anything. Her family wouldn't have paid attention to him if he didn't have spiritual stones. The leader got angry and asked how dare she say such a thing. Aunt May and the Dongfang family will not leave it like that. But Li Jian appeared in front of him and asked him to calm down, as they would soon end up just like him. The girl approached the boy and said that the gentleman left without waiting for her to wake up. She really wanted to thank him for the work he had done. If they fall in love, they will get married and have children within 3 years. The father told the girl that she needed to think about her studies, and not about boys. Li Jian is a high-flying bird and has the support of the Gu family. It is unlikely that she will succeed with him. But the girl asked her dad what he was saying. Her father asked her not to worry. Someday, he would turn to the arena of death for help, and she would meet him there again. The main character hit the leader with his hand with all his might. The soldiers ran up from the side and called the boss. The bandit looked displeased at the main character and asked who he was. He heard a group of people running up behind him. He decided to contact them. The guy turned around and looked angrily at the fighters. He asked, "Do they really want to fight him?" The bandits got scared and fell silent. They looked at the main character in fear. Unexpectedly, the fighters all fell to their knees. They didn't want to fight against the guy. The bandits, in a submissive voice, asked the main character to accept them. Li looked at the fighters very angrily and told them that they were smart. Zhu Wei was the second head of the Blackwater. He said that in their gang, the strongest person occupies the main position. The blind snake defeated him and took on the role of leader of the Blackwater. Zhu told the main character that all these rules were set by Aunt May. He looked at his interlocutor and said that everyone was chattering incessantly about the woman. The main character walked up to the side of the chair and prepared to sit in it. The guy told Zhu to tell the leader that the leader had changed. The girl with glasses looked at the main character and realized that he had everything under his control. Aunt May is the real head of the gang. She has a close relationship with the Dark Pavilion. Zhu, after a short pause, answered the guy that they were taking their leave immediately. The man headed towards the exit. He thought angrily that the main character shouldn't have made May angry. Li looked at the girl and asked why she was still here. The interlocutor told the guy that the Moo family, due to problems with their production and medical raw materials, were forced to cooperate with the blind snake. The interlocutor told the guy that he could now give her family a chance. He is now the head of the Blackwater. The main character thoughtfully repeated to himself about medical raw materials. He said he wanted to see it. Lee looked at the girl and asked where they were. The interlocutor replied that she needed to go to the Bay of the Clergy 3 hours from here by car. The main character asked his interlocutor to take him there. The girl explained that the guy would need a pass. She needs time to seek permission for him. The main character told the girl to come to him after she received the pass. The guy walked out of the building onto the street. There were people standing there, and a girl with purple hair was sitting. The girl told her master in an animal voice that she had finally waited for him. The main character told a girl named Shui Yu that she would go with him. The guy ordered his subordinates to make sure there was no commotion here. Shui went with the guy. She was glad that he took her with him. Other fighters remained near the entrance. A huge dark cat sat at the table and ate a large fish with appetite. A girl with green hair at the table stroked the cat and told him to eat more slowly. In the back of the room, the main character was sitting on the sofa. The old man in the stroller told the guy that his strength had reached the next level. Lee replied to the old man that he would have spent more time if he had not helped him. The old man explained to the guy that he had returned with victory and returned his grandchildren alive. He is very grateful to him for this. The guy told the main character that his grandfather had specially chosen this residence for him. Here, no one will interfere with self-improvement. Security at the highest level. So no one can get close to the guy unnoticed. The main character looked at the golden key. He felt that spiritual energy was coming from him. The guy realized that the Gu family had put a lot of effort into pleasing him. The main character joyfully took the key in his hands. The old man told the guy that this was the least he could do for him. The main character slowly rose from his seat and prepared to approach the old man. The guy extended his hand to the surprised grandfather and said that he was more useful than he thought. Lee touched his grandfather's head with his finger. The old man had a bright glow. The guy was very scared. He called his grandfather with great excitement. The girl with green hair turned to the side in fear. She had a familiar feeling. Unexpectedly, the old man very quickly fell out of his wheelchair and flew to the side on the floor. Grandfather fell to the floor with a bang and screamed in fear. The guy next to him became very worried. The young man asked the main character in fear, "Why did he do this?" Lee explained to his interlocutor that his strength had increased and he must reward the family. The old man came to his senses. He found the strength to rise above the floor. Unexpectedly, grandfather was able to get to his feet. He stood confidently and kept his balance. The old man was very excited. He realized that after he stood up, he was able to stand on his feet. Grandfather looked joyfully in front of him and said in a cheerful voice that he could stand on his feet again. The guy was very surprised by the old man's unexpected healing. He called out to him in fear. Grandfather said with excitement that he already thought that he would ride in a stroller all his life. The old man was kneeling in front of the main character. He thanked the guy for his kindness. The main character told his grandfather in a stern voice to remain faithful to him. He will be able to gain even greater power. The woman was in her luxurious mansion in the pool. The hostess was in the pool. She suddenly and displeasedly heard her phone ringing on the shore. The hostess began to climb out of the pool. She said in a dissatisfied voice that she was not allowed to relax. The woman took the phone in her hands and began to communicate with her interlocutor. After a short conversation, the hostess answered the interlocutor that she understood everything. A large black man approached from the side. He asked me what happened. The woman said that some boy decided that he was the leader of her gang. He decided to compete with her. The man hugged his girlfriend and asked, "Do you need help?" The woman replied that she herself would teach the guy a lesson. Late in the evening, the main character and his friends went out into the street. The cat noticed them from the side. The guy told the main character that his grandfather personally designed this residence. He asked the guest how he liked it. Lee looked around and thought that it was much better than his last shack. The guy and the girl told the main character that they would not disturb him and said goodbye. Lee looked around and felt that there was a lot of spiritual energy around. He decided to repair his blade. The main character was sitting in a meditative pose. He was completely focused. Lee extended his hand and magical artifacts flew up from it. The main character told someone to use the blood pearl for good. A small demonic pig was flying next to the guy. He demanded the man's brains. The main character explained to the animal that he should help him and would be able to get his brains. The cat on the roof said that his master owns an ancient magic cauldron. Lee was sitting on the ground in a meditative position. Someone from the pot continued to demand his brains. The boiler suddenly lit up. A bright purple glow appeared from above next to him. The main character extended his hand forward and thought that he needed to find another cauldron. He can't spend that much time repairing the sword. The boiler continued to glow angrily. Purple smoke came out of it. Suddenly, the cauldron lit up very brightly. A fire sword appeared inside it. The main character fearfully noticed how the huge cauldron in front of him suddenly fell down. The guy looked closely and noticed that a huge sword had finally appeared in front of him. Lee took the blade in his hands. He said that the sword was much more beautiful than it was before. The demonic pig asked the man for brains. The main character flew high up. He shouted to the demonic beast that he would check first now. Lee jumped high up. He decided to try a sword technique called Lin Yue. The guy swung his sword to the side. He activated his invisibility. The main character was flying around a big mountain. He tried to attack her with a sword. He cut the mountain into pieces with very powerful and strong blows. The main character was very surprised and amazed. There was an unusual feeling about it. The unexpected guy felt an incomprehensible feeling in his body. He was very scared. The main character could not understand why his body lost control of energy. Lee began to fall from a great height. He realized that he had poured in a lot of energy. The main character fell from a great height to the ground. His sword was stuck next to him. The guy rose above the ground and asked what was wrong with him. The cat on the roof said that someone had experienced a paradise kickback. The cat said that her master has great strength, but he still does not know all the subtleties of the foundation of heaven. The main character asked the little animal what kind of reason this was. The cat told the man that the power of the foundation of heaven was to release and accumulate spiritual power. You cannot pour ordinary energy into the spiritual cauldron so that it does not leak. The cat turned into a girl. She told the owner that he was lucky to have her. Double cultivation will help the guy. Lee asked the cat in disbelief. Can he really use the energy he's used to? Shui explained to her interlocutor that the base of heaven quickly absorbs ordinary energy. A person will not be able to replenish it at the usual speed. First, you need to find suitable spells before making the golden elixir. Shui looked from the roof into the yard and told the owner that a Moo had approached them. Moo came up and told Mr. Lee that she had received permission. The main character and his companions drove out of town by car. Shui got out of the car and said in an admiring voice that the environment smelled very tasty. Moo went up to the man and handed him the pass. She said that he wanted to show the deposit to a high-ranking guest. The man said that the pass allows only one person to enter. He asked who the high-ranking guest was. Moo turned around and thought that she didn't expect Mr. Lee to bring his girlfriend with him. Moo told the main character that his subordinate should stay here. Shui was very angry because she was not appreciated. The girl irritably said that she was not a subordinate, but a companion of the main character. Moo told her interlocutor that she needed to take 2 permits. Shui replied that she did not need an apology. Moo handed over a small bouquet for the girl. She was very happy and meowed. Shui rushed forward to grab a small bouquet. She told herself that she was an ordinary cat. The man told his guests that he wanted to see them off. Shui was lying on the ground and joyfully licking a bouquet. Lee, accompanied by his companions, walked through a deserted meadow. There was silence all around. The man told the girl that the medicinal herbs in the garden were of great value. The man told the girl that she and her friend should take care of the herbs. After that, the man walked up to the doors and began to open them slowly. Light appeared from within. The main character and his companions saw a huge garden in front of them. They noticed that there were many spiritual plants nearby. The guy saw a huge amount of medicinal herbs around him. He knew the properties of each of these plants. Moo told her companion that the entire garden belonged to her family. He can take any plant he likes. The main character silently walked up to the tree and looked at it. She called him from behind. The main character near the tree saw Xuan-level spiritual grass in front of him. He didn't expect to see her here. The girl told the main character that they have better quality medicines. She suggested that he look for something more suitable. Lee replied to his interlocutor that he had found what he needed. The main character extended his hand forward. A plant was flying next to him. The girl thought that Mr. Lee had a sharp eye. Lee held the flower between his hands. He thought that it was difficult to turn the spiritual herb into an elixir. But in liquid form, it has a much greater healing effect. A bright luminous ball appeared near the main character. Moo decided that the guy wanted to dissolve the flower. The main character extended both hands forward. He decided to use his skill. A bright green glow appeared next to the guy. The girl behind him jumped back sharply. Moo asked the guy with excitement if everything was okay with him. Lee stood with his eyes closed and held his hands in front of him. A special cultivator's outfit appeared on the main character's body. He thought that people use the benefits of nature and return nothing in return. He said to himself very thoughtfully that you have to pay for everything. The main character began to wave his hands in front of him. A luminous cloud appeared in front of him. Lee sharply launched a luminous ball to the side. He told himself that only the strongest could survive. After the bright ball fell to the ground, a very strong explosion was heard. Stones scattered in all directions. Moo turned to the main character with great surprise. She didn't understand what was doing it. Lee said to himself joyfully that he was able to understand what this spiritual herb was. The girl was frightened and thought that the guy wanted to destroy everything. At this time, the stranger appeared from the side. She asked in a dissatisfied voice, "Who is here next to her?" A girl named Luo Chunshin angrily asked the guy, how dare he destroy the possessions of the Moo family. The main character realized that he was seeing a high-level cultivator in front of him. He thought that medicinal plants provided good benefits to the Moo family. The girl tried to justify herself to Lo. Lo angrily asked the girl why she didn't do anything, although she saw that the man was in their garden. The girl got angry. She swung her hand to hit Moo in the face. Lee stopped the cultivator's hand. He explained that it was he who caused the commotion in the garden, not the girl. Lo angrily asked the guy, "Where did he come from?" "He destroyed the garden and also protected Mo." The girl angrily shouted for the main character that he would pay for his insolence. She used the breath of the tree against him. The main character calmly dodged to the side. Green lightning flew past him. Lee asked his rival in a calm voice, "Is this really all?" Lo looked angrily at the main character and said that he doesn't value his life at all. The cultivator angrily told the guy that he didn't even know how much power she had. Lee looked at the girl with displeasure. He couldn't believe that he couldn't imagine such power. Moo looked in front of her and said that now the daughter-in-law is absolutely furious. The female cultivator suddenly jumped up and ran forward. She prepared to attack the guy. The girl angrily shouted as she walked that the main character was now going to hell. Lee stood and calmly looked at his opponent. He told her that they would now try out his improved body. Moo scaredly rushed to the side. She screamed at the guy to run away. The main character stood calmly and watched as multicolored lightning flew at him. Lo looked at the main character in surprise. She didn't understand how he could defend himself. I angrily asked my rival, "Has she really not calmed down yet?" The girl angrily told the main character that he was on the territory of the Moo family. At this time, green leaves began to appear from the plants and flew towards the person. Lo shouted in an angry voice for the guy, that no one dares to humiliate her. She threatened him that he would live his last day. Moo shouted to the guy that she had used willow leaves against him. The main character must be careful. Lee realized that the girl was using a wooden artifact against him. She wanted to temporarily strengthen her skills. Moo shouted to the cultivator that it was she who brought her here. She bears all the responsibility. Lo angrily shouted to the girl that she would first kill the guy and then deal with her. A huge green demon appeared. He shouted to the people that they would die today. There was a very strong explosion. Moo was very scared because her friend could die. Moo covered her head with her hand. She repeated to herself that it was all her fault. The girl suddenly felt that after the explosion, the main character remained next to her. Moo looked to the side in surprise. Lee said in a calm voice to the cultivator that she was incredibly weak. The main character said in a calm voice that he is usually prudent with weak people. Lee pointed his hand forward and shouted to his rival that he would not spare her. He used a Taoist element called Thunderclap. The main character launched a powerful yellow lightning bolt from his hand at the cultivator. I was very surprised. She didn't understand why she couldn't hurt the guy. She demanded that the green demon repulse the attack. A very bright yellow light flew past the girl. She was thrown aside. Lo fell unconscious to the ground. She did not have the strength to fight further. The cultivator felt that her strength seemed to have left her, and her spirit was greatly weakened. The cultivator turned around and noticed how the main character approached her along with his companion. The main character raised his finger, and a small yellow ball appeared above him. He told the girl that she should be held accountable for the attempted murder. Moo scaredly told the guy not to touch the cultivator. She suggested that he return to medicinal herbs. The main character told his interlocutor that for the sake of her safety, he would leave Lo alone. The main character swung his hand and hit the cultivator's leg. He said that Lo would never get back on his feet. The cultivator threatened the guy that he had destroyed half of the Moo family's garden. He also injured her leg. The main character was very angry and dissatisfied. He glanced angrily at the cultivator. Unexpectedly, the main character took off. The girl on the side called out to him in fear. Lee reached out his hand and grabbed the girl by the throat with all his strength. The main character angrily shouted to his rival that she would die. He strangled her with his hand. Lee stood and calmly looked ahead. He continued to strangle the cultivator. Moo was very scared. She looked at the main character with great excitement. Lee unclenched his hand and the dead female cultivator fell to the ground from it. The main character told the interlocutor that they could get back to business. The girlfriend fearfully agreed with him. Moo looked around in fear. She said that almost all the herbs were destroyed. The girl knelt down and said that it was all over for her. Chongxin is dead and the garden is destroyed. The main character closed his eyes and extended his hands forward. He said that with the help of body and soul, he nourishes everything that exists. Energy from the person began to descend to the earth. The leaves began to come to life. Moo sat down on the ground and said in a joyful voice that the herbs began to come to life. The main character raised his hand up and said that life begins in the sky. The heavenly path returns to its origin. A bright stone hovered above his hand. The girlfriend asked with interest, "Is there really a crystal over his hand?" It contained an accumulation of pure spiritual energy. The main character told his interlocutor that in exchange for the stone she should forgive him for the mess. Lee drove up in a car to the entrance to a large building. The driver bowed and wished him all the best. The main character entered the building and was surprised because the door was open. He noticed a cat on the floor with a small plant. The guy heard a cry for help. He realized that Gu Tianren was calling him. Li knocked down the doors as he walked and abruptly burst into the room. He asked, "What happened?" The main character ran into the room and looked inside in surprise. He saw two girls. The girl told her friend in a dissatisfied voice not to make a commotion. Both girlfriends were surprised. They looked at the main character shyly. The main character turned towards the exit. He told the girls that he thought they were in danger. The girlfriends inside the bath were very scared. The girl said after the guy that she returned the Chi-Chi back. They didn't expect him to return so quickly. The main character slammed the door and told the girls that he would not interfere. The guy exhaled in relief. He stood near the door and still listened. Li turned around and walked away. He told himself that it was all reckless. The main character entered the room and noticed that there was a cat sitting on the floor. The cat turned into a girl and told the owner that he could contact her. The guy answered the cat that it didn't concern her. Shui hugged the guy and said that she was his companion. He might need her help. The girl told the owner that he was still under the influence of the spiritual herb. Li was sitting on the sofa himself. Shui wanted to tell him how to protect himself from energy leakage. The main character opened his eyes and told the girl in a calm voice that she could speak. Shui told the guy that he should take energy pills. This will help stabilize the condition and improve cultivation. Li explained to the girl that he had never heard of pills. He asked how to get them. Shui approached the man and touched him with her hands. She wanted to tell him everything. The girl touched the guy and said that first he needed to feed her. Then she will tell you everything. At this time, two girlfriends walked to the side. One of them wanted to show the main character what kind of clothes they bought. Ji ran at full speed ahead after her friend. She could barely keep up with her. The girls ran into the room. They were surprised to see the main character sitting next to Shui. The girlfriend asked the guy in fear, "What is he doing with the Shui?" Ji judiciously said that next to the guy was the same Shui who helped him practice. The main character pushed his girlfriend aside and told the Ji girl that she should be with the Gu family. The girl looked at the guy and said that she just wanted to ask him something. The main character asked the girl, what did she want to talk to him about? The girlfriend extended her hand to the guy and slowly then took his hand. Ji looked at her friend and explained that this was all a very personal matter. Shui looked in front of him and said that there was a wonderful girl next to the guy, but he does not appreciate it. The friend said in a cheerful voice that Ji-Chi supported the main character in difficult times. The main character told his girlfriend that she told him everything, and that he himself had been through a lot in recent days. Li told the girl that he fought the demon in the death arena and punished Dongfang Yuanshuo. Ji looked at the main character and said that she looked very pathetic. The girl said excitedly that she didn't want to be a burden. She added that she wants to protect herself and her mother. Ji looked at the surprised guy and said that she also wanted to protect him. The girl jumped to her feet. She wanted to turn to her friend. Ji asked the guy if he could teach her superpowers. The main character, after a short pause, answered the girl that he would not teach her. The girl thought that her ability was only enough for healing. She herself is very weak. Li explained to his girlfriend that abilities are a weak force. He wanted to teach her something different. Ji turned around in fear and looked at the main character. She became very interested. The main character explained to his interlocutor in a calm voice that he would teach her cultivation. The guy ran into his father's office. He wanted to tell him about what Mu Fei had done. A guy named Mu Mingqi told the man that the girl had been leaning over all day doing nothing. Along with her came some goner who killed his bride. A man named Mu Hogan called the guy a little bastard in an angry voice. A girl ran into the room. She wanted to tell her father about the family's affairs. The guy angrily told the girl that she was an accomplice in the crime. She stood and watched as his bride was killed. The girl explained that Mr. Li destroyed the garden unintentionally. She took responsibility for Luo's death. Mu answered the father and son so that they would listen to everything she wanted to say. The girl took the crystal out of her pocket. She told her interlocutors not to touch Mr. Li. Mincy asked the girl in surprise, "Where did she get the S-class crystal?" Hogan asked his interlocutor who gave her the stone. The girl was holding a stone in her hands. She explained that this was Mr. Li's payment for the destroyed garden. The man was surprised when he realized that the guy wanted to make amends for the Mu family with the help of the crystal. He asked, "Who is this gentleman?" The girl told the man that the guy was ready to be their partner. He wants full access to the Mu family's medical rights. Mincy looked sideways at the girl with interest. He didn't understand when she managed to become so smart. The guy told his sister to introduce him to Mr. Li as soon as possible. Mu reminded the interlocutor that the guy killed his sister. "Mincy," he said in a sly voice, that for their family to prosper they would have to sacrifice something. His fiancée died and there is no need to stir up the past. The father told the girl that she must serve her sentence. He demanded that Mu give her brother the crystal, and he would take her position. The guy extended his hand forward. He told his sister to find herself a husband and not worry anymore. I told my brother not to be self-confident. She explained that Mr. Lee was not so easy to do business with. My friend was very surprised. She asked the guy, "Does he really want to teach her cultivation?" Lee bowed and told the girl that he would help restore spiritual strength. She will be able to cultivate immortality. Lee raised his burning fingers in front of him. He asked his girlfriend if she was ready to lose her innate abilities. Ching told the guy in a joyful voice that she was ready if she was with him. The girl stepped back sharply. She noticed that the guy came close to her. Lee started jumping around the girl. He used Wasteland Blade and Awakening Righteousness against her. The friend fearfully felt inside herself that her internal energy had changed. The girl looked ahead in fear. She felt great energy in her body. Ching leaned to the side. She felt a superpower spread throughout her body. The girlfriend told the main character that she was in pain. The guy explained to her that he had cleared her meridians. She should now feel the spiritual energy fluctuating around her. The main character demanded from the girl that she not resist the flow. The girlfriend answered the guy in a frightened voice that she felt everything. Lee extended his hand forward. He told the girl to focus on her heart. Lee told the girl to collect energy in her body bit by bit, and then release it with the power of thought. Ching sharply extended her hand forward. She had a small beam of energy. The girlfriend in a crying voice told the main character that she was very weak and wondered. The main character carefully looked at his girlfriend with a special look. Lee took a closer look and noticed that the girl had a very rare ethereal root. The etheric root transforms the spiritual energy of heaven and art into great power. In history, there is a figure who elevated himself to the gods and built his own world. Even the world of immortals feared her. Ji looked at the main character and asked, "Is he really laughing?" Lee replied to his interlocutor that she had promising prospects. The main character told the girl that that's enough for today. You need to wait a couple more days before returning to classes. He explained that they really needed the spiritual eye. The girl was sitting in her house and watching TV. She was watching a news report. The presenter said that recently 2 cases of disappearance of female students were reported at Tongyang College. The presenter said police have not yet received any leads. Therefore, the criminal is still at large. Law enforcement officers ask students to pay great attention to personal safety. The door opened and Ji looked in. She asked her friend where the main character went. The girl replied that the guy left half an hour ago. Ji was very scared when she heard that her friend had left. She decided that she had failed to impress him. The girl shouted to her leaving friend to be careful on the streets. Ji replied that Mr. Gu would be with her. The guy welcomed the main character to the MU family. Lee stood next to his girlfriend. The main character looked at the guy's hand and asked, "Where is Mu Fei's girl?" Mincy told the guest that his sister was ill and could not greet him, but he can answer all his questions. Lee explained to his dissatisfied interlocutor that he was doing business with Mu's girl and not with her family. Mincy told the guest that they, as 2 men, could find a common language. He decided to offer his interlocutor a great benefit. The main character very angrily told his interlocutor to leave. Mincy looked displeasedly after the departing guy. He realized that he would not listen to him. Mincy angrily looked after the main character. He didn't like the fact that the guests wanted to communicate only with Mu Fei. The girlfriend told the main character that there were no fairies in the room. This means that her brother lied to her. Lee asked his companion to help him find the girl. Shui grabbed the main character's hand. She didn't want him to leave her. The girlfriend looked slyly at the guy and said that she would go with him. After a long walk, he told his companion that they had been walking for 3 hours. He asked if she was sure that the fairies were here. Shui answered the guy in a tired voice that she was sure. The girl slyly said that cats have a very good sense of smell, but she doesn't smell the girl. Shui followed the main character. She didn't understand what the girl could be doing in such a wilderness. The girl told the main character what they bought for the place. In front of them were the gates of some hangar. Shui told her companion that he could not have done anything without her help. Inside the hangar, unfamiliar fighters were sitting at a table. They realized that someone had come to them. One of the fighters threw his cards aside. He told the girl that she was lost and they would take care of her. The main character stood silently with his girlfriend. They examined the strangers. Shui swung her paw and hit the bandit with all her might. She demanded that he show respect to her master. The girl beat the lying bandit with all her might and screamed so that he would not piss her off. The main character extended his hand upward and raised the gate to the hangar above him. Lee stood and held the gate above his head with his hand. He noticed that there were people in cages inside. The main character and his companion went inside the hangar and began to look around. The girl approached the cage. She told the main character that all prisoners have superpowers. Lee glanced at the man in the cage. He explained that the spiritual energy in the bodies of the captives is sealed. The girl looked quietly to the side. She sniffed it very carefully. Shui sat down and said that she could smell the girl. Fairies had to be here somewhere. The main character did not understand why there were so few guards outside the hangar. The girlfriend heard a suspicious noise. She called out to the gentleman in fear. The girl looked up and saw a huge snake under the ceiling. The girl screamed in fear because she saw a large snake. In a calm voice, he told the stranger to come out. The snake under the ceiling said in an angry voice that he had found something tasty for himself in an abandoned warehouse. He demanded that the guy give up her power and he would let him go. The main character looked displeased at the monster and said that he met a creature here disguised as a werewolf. The snake became very angry. He didn't like that the man called him a creature. The creature suddenly rushed from the ceiling and decided to attack the guy below it. The snake suddenly dropped from the ceiling to the ground. The guy stood and looked at him calmly. The main character calmly looked to the side. He prepared to fight against the creature. Small predatory vipers appeared around the snake's head. He activated the protective dome. The creature climbed up to the ceiling and said that it was using snake eye and petrification. Lee closed his eyes. His opponent asked him, did he really want to fight him with his eyes closed? The snake angrily told the guy that thanks to his technique, he would bleed until his death. Lee activated his magical vision and looked angrily to the side at the snake. The main character looked angrily at the creature. Opposite him, there was a dark aura around him. The snake screamed in fear that the hair on his head caught fire. The frightened and angry creature could not understand what the man had done to it. The snake felt as if someone was cutting it into pieces. He imagined how the guy in front of her was very huge with a blade in his hand. The snake jumped high up and told the man that he had underestimated him. The monster spun in the air and shouted to the guy that now it was time for his move. The snake looked at the guy angrily and decided to use Cobra Throw against him. The main character launched a stream of very powerful purple energy against the monster. A stream of powerful energy caught the serpent and threw him far to the side. The monster stood displeased on the earth. The explosion threw him far away. The snake said to himself, dissatisfied that he had lost a lot of energy. The main character ran up from the side and waved his hand. He asked his opponent, has he really lost something? Lee stuck 2 fingers forward. He decided to use the Jiaoxu sword and absorption. The snake turned to the side in fear. A bright glow appeared behind him. A very strong and bright explosion was heard inside the hangar. The light flew far out. At this time, the girl came to her senses. She opened her eyes and meowed softly. The main character told his girlfriend to get up. The girl asked him, where is the snake? Main character approached the monster and asked who his boss was. The snake explained to the man that he was just a guard. He said that the Dongfang family was conducting experiments. Lee repeated to himself about the Dongfang family. He asked the snake if he was a werewolf. The monster screamed in fear that he was an experimental object. The snake said that he was somehow locked in a container with some kind of liquid. After that, he turned into a monster. The main character asked himself, why does the Dongfang family crossbreed people and animals? He decided to move away and look for Mu Fei's girlfriend. The guy headed towards the exit. The girl sat down next to the snake and decided to try to see what it tasted like. Main character walked up to the cages and carefully watched the people. They were all unconscious. Lee looked at the cage and noticed that someone had put a seal from the world of immortals. The stranger was able to combine the spiritual power of people and animals. Lee held out 2 fingers in front of him. He was able to destroy the cage around the girl. The main character picked up his girlfriend in his arms. He asked how did she end up here? The girl said that she needed to bring medicinal herbs here. After she entered the hangar threshold, she immediately lost consciousness. The main character thought to himself about the slaughterhouse, herbs, and demonic cultivation. He realized that in front of him was the handwriting of that very sect. A large truck was speeding along a country road. He was heading towards the hangar. The car stopped near the doors of the warehouse. The driver jumped out of the cab. The guy jumped out of the cab and said that he had come to pick up the goods. He headed towards the warehouse doors. A snake appeared. He asked the driver why he arrived so late today. The guy looked around at the bodies of the fighters. He asked what happened. The snake said that a couple of people wanted to escape, but he caught them. The guy looked inside the hangar and said that he needed to pick up Moo's girl. The monster answered the man that the girl was right near the exit. The driver asked and looked carefully at the girl. She was sitting in a cage. The guy said in a thoughtful voice that there were no defects in the product. It's time to load. The car turned around and drove away. The snake crawled deep into the hangar. The girl asked the monster if it was possible to let the master go alone. The snake replied that everything was fine. 10 minutes ago, the main character was sitting in the hangar with his girlfriends. Moo told me that someone was supposed to pick up the goods today. Shui smiled slyly and said that the secret recipe for eliminating the leakage of spiritual energy is in werewolves. The girlfriend hugged the main character and said that she had come up with a plan on how to get to the enemy. Shui reached out to her friend and said that she would tell him everything if he kissed her. The main character looked at the girl carefully. She was already very close to him. Lee extended his hand forward and demanded that the girl speak closer to the point. Shui explained to the guy that she would cast a charm to disguise herself as a snake. The guy will pretend to be Mu Fei so that he can then be taken away as a commodity. Shui told her interlocutor that there was no point in worrying about the guy. The Dongfang family will not do anything to him. Mu answered the girl that they had no idea who the carrier was. Mu said with excitement that the guy was risking his life for her. She can't sit still. She suggested returning home and wanted to explain everything to her father. The truck was racing along the night road. The main character was sitting in the back. The main character sat inside the cage and thought about his own things. The car continued to drive. Lee remembered a sect called the Earthly Madmen. They created a technique for reincarnating a demon spirit. As a result, they were able to absorb the spiritual energy, soul, blood, and other characteristics of a cultivator. At this time, the rear doors of the car began to open. Lee became wary. The guy was disguised as a girl. He sat in the cage and listened carefully. At this time, the driver took the cage out of the back and drove it on a cart through the tunnel in the cave. Lee begged from his cage and asked to be killed. The driver told the prisoner that he could scream a lot and he didn't have much time left. The main character became sharply wary. He turned to the side and felt a strong aura. The guy peered carefully to the side in front of him. He saw a purple aura. The main character saw in front of him a dark aura coming out of the door. He realized that all this did not bode well. The guy brought the cage into the room. He told Dr. K that the experimental subject had arrived. The scientist did not turn around. He told the guest that he was busy and he could leave the girl aside. Lee looked carefully inside the laboratory. He noticed human bodies in the capsules. The main character took a closer look and noticed that the test subjects in the capsules were familiar to him. Lee realized that he saw the Mo brothers in front of him. They were previously defeated by Gu Tianren in the death arena. K happily connected 2 cables with liquid. He decided to see how the new solution would work. He decided that the brothers had to change a lot. At this time, multicolored liquid flowed through the hoses straight to the patients in capsules. K stood attentively and watched the patient inside the capsule with great interest. Suddenly, the guy inside the glass bell came to his senses. He suddenly opened his eyes. The patient screamed very angrily. He swung his arms and broke the glass cover. The guy said in a calm voice that it was a failure again. Lee watched everything from the cage with great attention. The patient with burning eyes angrily rushed at the doctor. K shouted to the test subject that he had broken the capsule again. The main character was sitting in a cage. He heard a very loud noise behind him as the test subject broke out of the capsule. The patient extended his hand to grab the doctor. At this time, a guy ran up from the side to hit him with all his might. The guy managed to swing his hand and hit the test subject in the face with his hand with all his might. After a very powerful blow, the patient flew far back and fell to the floor. The angry doctor told the guy named San to deal with the patient. The San turned around and told the scientist that the solution had worked. He asked if it was really necessary to get rid of the patient. At this time, the test subject was sitting on the ground and his eyes shone with a bright light. The patient looked angrily at the guy and shouted that he would kill him now. Kay explained angrily that now they were facing another failed experiment. San stood on the floor and calmly watched as the angry patient flew at him. The fighter extended his hand forward and shouted to the test subject that he will now rest in peace. San stood and held his hand in front of him. After this, a very bright fire explosion was heard. The main character turned around and looked out of the cage. He realized that the sage's cultivation was at the last stage. The guy knocked with his hands and said in a calm voice that everything was ready. The scientist happily told the guy that he would forever remain his favorite. The San answered him that the goods had been delivered. Kay turned and told his subordinates to bring a new capsule. He wanted to put Madame Moo there. Shui sat thoughtfully near the body of the snake. She said that she needed to penetrate the spiritual technique of demon transformation. The main character in the form of a girl was inside the capsule. He thought that if Shui's words were true, then personal intervention was needed to eliminate the spiritual leak. Patients were in glass capsules. Scientists walked around them at the side. Kay said that Mincy is a real tyrant. He does not allow his wife to rest in peace. The scientist decided to combine tree power and control power. The scientist prepared to connect the cable. He said angrily that Mrs. Moo must endure the experiment. The main character was inside a glass capsule. 2 transparent hoses containing liquid approached his head. The main character found himself inside a parallel green reality. He was chained to 2 stones with chains. Lee stood chained to 2 mountains. He heard someone appear nearby. A green demon appeared. He told the man that he would take his body and his strength. He promised to haunt him forever. The main character screamed loudly. He could not free himself from the chains on his hands. Lee thought angrily to himself that the art of transformation negatively affects the spiritual essence of the owner. Evil spirits only take advantage of this. The main character was scared. He realized that now he could be consumed by a demon. The guy felt severe pain in his body. He remembered his girlfriend Shui. Lee felt a very strong and powerful blow of energy in his body. He felt it from the inside. The guy's heart began to beat faster. Green energy flowed through his veins. My heart started beating even faster. It began to burst out of the guy's chest. The main character screamed loudly. He found the strength to break the chains. Lee felt with excitement that internal energy began to spread throughout all the cells of his body. The scientist looked at the patient in the capsule. He told his subordinate to increase the power by another 20%. The main character told himself that he no longer felt the presence of the girl Lo. This means that Shui Yu succeeded. A guy came up from behind and called Bai Shu. The warrior was very surprised when he heard someone's voice. The guy said that his interlocutor acts righteously, but uses devilish methods. He reported that he was no longer the coward he used to be. The warrior turned around and asked his interlocutor what he wanted to say. The guy looked at the warrior with an angry look. He decided to explain his words to him. After that, the guy suddenly rushed forward and shouted that he wanted to get his body back. The main character fought against his rival. There was a bright, fiery glow around them. Lee extended his hand forward to protect himself from the blow. He told his opponent that he was his inner demon. The guy looked angrily at the main character and said that they were one. He added that there was nothing wrong with them teaming up. The fighter jumped back sharply. The main character also jumped back to defend himself. Lee extended his hand forward. He shouted to his opponent that his path was beyond his reach. The fighter waved his hand and sharp blades flew at his opponent. He told the main character not to resist. The guy rushed forward at the main character. He told him to remember everyone he once killed. Lee replied to his opponent that they themselves could choose their own end. The guy shouted angrily that his opponent was mocking him. He added that he had no choice. Lee silently looked at his opponent with a searching gaze. He decided to try to defend himself from the attack. The main character did not have time to defend himself from the powerful blow. As a result, he was carried to the side. The fighter approached and told Bai Shu to join him. He promised that together they would punish their enemies and not allow anyone to rise above them. The main character said in a weakening voice that he was sorry because his rival once experienced a lot of pain. Lee told his opponent in an angry voice that his personal past and injustice were much greater than his. Lee extended his hand. A very bright pillar of fire appeared near her. The main character sharply swung his hand and with all his strength knocked the guy away from himself with a powerful blow. The guy was lying on the ground. He shouted in a weakening voice for the warrior to wait. The fighter looked at his opponent and demanded that he destroy him. He didn't need pity. Lee told the guy that he had already taken over his body. Someday he will find it in the other world. He promised that he would bring good to the world before his resurrection. The guy was lying on the ground. He looked at his opponent with great surprise. The fighter's body lit up. He thanked the main character in a weakening voice. Lee extended his hands to the side and activated the soul technique. Fire appeared on the body of the lying warrior. The main character was surprised. He noticed how a stream of fire began to flow towards his chest. He felt deep within himself as if he were ascending somewhere. There was a glow around him. The scientist stood near the glass bell and looked at the experimental subject with admiration. Kay rushed to the glass capsule and hugged it joyfully. His subordinates looked at him in surprise from the side. The patient was motionless inside the capsule. Her eyes were closed. The San noticed that the patient behind the glass perked up. He shouted to the scientist to be careful. Suddenly there was a very powerful explosion and the glass cover shattered. The scientist and his servants were very surprised when they saw an unfamiliar guy in front of them. Kay asked the stranger in surprise, "Who is he?" Lee looked angrily at the attackers and said that he would give them what they deserved. The doctor angrily shouted to the guy not to let the main character leave. San asked Lee displeasedly, who was he and what was he doing with the eldest daughter of the Moo family? The main character looked angrily at his opponent and explained that he had no right to know. San swung his hand. He shouted to the main character that he would never get out alive. Lee stood absolutely calm. A bright explosion was heard next to him and the San was thrown back. San was scared. He felt that a powerful force had thrown him away from his opponent. Kay shouted joyfully that the stranger had used a protective net. He ordered the fighter to take him away. San looked carefully at his opponent and said that he would see how he would parry the new blow. The fighter suddenly jumped up and tried to immediately hit the main character. Lee stood under a protective dome. San swung his hand with all his might and hit the dome next to the main character. Lee realized that his opponent was using a technique similar to the technique of the Kunlun sect. San shouted to his opponent in an angry voice that he wouldn't last long now. The fighter hit the protective wall with all his might and shouted to his opponent that he would die. Lee very quickly extended his hand in front of him and was able to grab his opponent's fist. The main character told the fighter that he was taking a very rough approach. He reminded that the true flame deity technique is not based on brute force. San was scared. He saw a sharp stream of fiery flames in front of him. He was holding a huge sword in his hands. He swung it at his opponent. The main character turned around in surprise. He realized that the fighter had disappeared somewhere. At this time, a fiery whirlwind appeared behind the main character. A San appeared from above. He decided to attack his opponent unnoticed in this way. The fighter was surprised. He looked to the side and noticed that his opponent had disappeared somewhere. The main character very suddenly appeared behind the San and swung his sword against him. San swung his fist with all his might and tried to hit his opponent. Lee accelerated and prepared to run against his opponents. He shouted that he was holding up well. San displeasedly asked the main character who he is and what does he need. Lee sternly asked the fighter when did he learn the flame technique of the Kunlun sect. The main character looked angrily at his opponent and said that he had not played enough yet. The fighter got angry. He didn't like that the main character looked down on him. The scientist was unhappy. He told the San to stop, otherwise he would destroy his entire laboratory. The fighter answered the doctor that the laboratory could be rebuilt. The Dongfang family has a lot of money. A very bright fiery flame appeared around the San. The main character stood next to him with a sword. The guy shouted to the girl that she needed to run away. The interlocutor replied that the San has an advantage and they do not need to run. The girl said that in the last battle, San was able to finish off the super squad. The fighter goes crazy when he releases all his power. The damage can be very huge. The fighter angrily shouted to the main character that he was going to die. He bent down and prepared to attack. The main character ran forward and shouted to his opponent that he could attack him. San launched fireballs against the main character. Lee dodged in all directions. The main character ran forward at full speed. He launched fiery swords against his opponent. San stood calmly and looked at the blades flying at him. He didn't shy away. San extended his hand forward and grabbed the stream of fire with his fingers. He looked at him carefully. The fighter was surprised to realize that his opponent was using his own technique. San extended his hand forward and shouted to the running main character that he was about to burn. Lee turned to the side. He noticed that they would now use fire magic against him. San swung his sword. He shouted to his opponent that he would use a flame tornado against him. The main character was amused. He was surprised that his opponent called all this military equipment. "Is there ice around?" The fire stopped and began to go out quickly. San's body began to be covered in ice. The main character said that he used the Moonfrost sword technique. San was surprised that his opponent was able to control the ice. He didn't understand why he was so much better than him. The main character demanded that his opponent tell him where he stole the techniques of the flame deity. The fire around the San became even stronger. He felt funny because his opponent was confident of his victory. The fighter's body began to transform from a human body into a monster body. He angrily said that he would burn everything around to the ground and take the main character with him. Lee noted with surprise that his opponent had the 5th level of the flame deity technique. The main character extended his hand forward and burning hieroglyphs appeared in front of him. He decided to show him his yang-yang techniques. A huge monster with a sword appeared behind the main character. Lee activated the true form of the flame deity. Lee, in the body of a powerful fighter, began to step forward towards his opponent. San was very scared. He couldn't believe what he saw in front of him. The fighter shouted in a dissatisfied and offended voice that it was so unfair. The main character swung his huge blade and prepared to cut down his opponent. Lee hit the fighter on the head with a very powerful blow and he flew to the side. Kay was very scared. He looked at the fighter's body and repeated his name to himself. Lee looked at the doctor and said that now it was his turn to die. Kay picked up the remote control. He told the evil protagonist that he would now see his biggest failure. An unknown monster appeared from the side. He looked at the people with his infrared vision. The monster screamed angrily and loudly. Huge chains were chained to his body. The demon broke the chain on himself and began to walk slowly towards the people. The monster waved its arms as it walked. He gradually approached the main character. The demon hit the wall with all his might, and stones scattered in all directions. He heard danger behind him. The main character carefully turned around and looked back. Behind him stood a huge predatory monster. The doctor turned to the monster nicknamed Zero and demanded that he kill the guy. Lee thought to himself that the monster was the one who made him feel threatened. Zero kicked the ground with all his might. Stones flew around. The monster began to knock with all its might on the protective barrier around the man. The main character stood scared and held the sword in front of him. He saw that the demon's fangs were already piercing his defense. Zero hit the main character with all his might and he flew far into the wall. After a long and fast flight, I hit a wall and cracks appeared on it. The main character glanced at his opponent. He realized that the monster was a level higher than himself. This battle had to be resolved quickly. The demon accelerated sharply and immediately rushed at the guy at full speed. He looked very angrily at his opponent and realized that he was very fast. The main character very quickly ran out from behind to attack Zero from behind. Lee swung and used the sword technique Hao Riem Chi of the Changhong sword. There was a powerful explosion after the impact, and the demon remained on his feet. The main character was very surprised. He didn't understand how the monster could survive. Zero looked at the man very angrily. In his hands was a huge golden sword. Kay shouted at the guy in an angry voice to pray that he wouldn't fall into his hands. The monster screamed angrily. He rushed at the man opposite him with a blade in his hands. Zero launched the golden sword from his hands at the man. The main character jumped up to defend himself. Lee put both hands in front of him. He was able to fight off the sword flying at him. There was a very strong and powerful explosion. The guy was carried far to the side. The monster jumped up angrily. The main character was lying on the ground very scared. The demon jumped on top of the man and hit him with all his might to finish him off. Kay said in a joyful voice that he was very proud of his experimental object, nicknamed Zero. The professor looked in front of him displeasedly. He noticed that the guy had disappeared somewhere. Zero saw a broken wall in front of him. He didn't understand where the man had gone. The main character appeared behind the monster. He told him in an angry voice that he was fighting and living like a puppet. Lee raised 2 fingers up. He told the demon that he would be merciful and free him. The main character swung his sword. He prepared to use the Haori technique. Lee activated a skill called 9 Suns. Balls of fire appeared around him. After that, the fireballs began to turn into firebirds. The main character swung his sword. At this time, the birds flew far ahead. The monster angrily ran towards the man at full speed. The birds flew in his direction. Lee jumped over the monster and ran forward. Firebirds pierced the demon's body. The main character turned to the side. He noticed the demon's smoking body lying on the floor. The main character looked angrily at the frightened scientist and said that it was his turn. Kay looked at the guy angrily and said that he couldn't just defeat his proudest project. At this time, the demon gradually began to come to life. He opened his eyes and prepared to rise. The monster jumped to its feet and screamed angrily. A bright red mist came from the wounds on his body. Zero screamed angrily to himself. He prepared to attack the man. The demon jumped up sharply and turned around to attack the man. The main character managed to jump to the side. The Zero hit the floor with all its might and stones scattered around. Lee swung his sword. He prepared to use a skill called 9 Suns. The main character flew behind the demon and swung his blade to the side. Lee turned around and looked at the Zero. He told him in a stern voice that that was all now. The man said goodbye to the demon. Yellow birds began to fly out of the monster's burning body. The demon's entire body was engulfed in fire. He screamed very loudly but could not stop anything. Kay ran up to the demon and fearfully demanded that he use the power of self-healing. Lee calmly said that all this would be useless. His sword technique is designed to defeat evil spirits and heretics. The technique also suppresses the regeneration of chi and blood. Zero wouldn't be able to use his self-healing ability right now. Kay frightenedly grabbed his remote control. He didn't understand how this could happen. He wanted to call more experimental subjects to help him. The main character swung his sword and cut the remote control into pieces along with the scientist's hands. Kay screamed very angrily and scared. He realized that his hands had been cut off. The main character sat down in front of the doctor and asked where he got all the techniques he taught to the test subjects. Kay said in a frightened voice that he received the super transference technique from the Dongfang family. The scientist demanded that the guy let him go. The main character looked sternly at the doctor and said that all his innocent victims deserve an explanation. Lee reached out and grabbed his blade and told the scientist not to worry. The main character hit the doctor on the head with his sword and said that he would soon send the entire Dongfang family after him. The main character looked in front of him at the body of the scientist, the monster, and San. So Lee thought to himself that the superpowers here are very strong. He realized that the Dongfang family had found an unusual opportunity. The guy decided to first notify the Gu family so that they could take control of this place. A demonic piglet appeared from the side. He frightenedly demanded a brain. The man told the pig that the bodies could be food for him. The guy decided to look around first. The evil pig attacked the bodies. He kept repeating to himself about the brain. Lee glanced around in the corridor. He decided that the traces of artificial development in these caves were very ancient. They do not belong to the Dongfang family. The main character carefully approached the large mine. A bright light came from inside it. At this time, the piglet flew up to the main character and grabbed his hand. He kept demanding the brain. The monster suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the man with great interest. The joyful pig pointed his finger at the guy and repeated to himself about the brain. The main character felt to himself only a weak sign of life. He decided to go down and explore. Lee very carefully and slowly descended from top to bottom in the shaft. A small monster was flying next to him. The main character landed on the floor. He noticed many bodies around him. I saw that among the bodies there were also living and exhausted people. The surviving people carried the bodies of other people on carts. The main character realized that next to him there were creatures that were failed experiments. The last remnants of usefulness were drawn out of them. The main character looked away. He noticed that the surviving creatures were taking the bodies and sending them somewhere. Lee looked to the side with great attention. Next to him was a surprised piglet. In the center of the room there was a huge green pot. The surviving people loaded bodies there. In a huge green cauldron, all human bodies were burned and processed. The main character said that in front of him is the furnace of 100 purifications. This magical artifact is connected to the earth altar. Souls are purified and turned into sources of power for the practice of demonic techniques. The main character turned around and asked the monster if he really brought him here so that he could help him absorb it. The pig replied that he could not cope. The man told the monster that his current status meant little to him. Without progress, he may eventually give up. Now everything depends on the ability of the piglet. The monster shouted angrily that he needed a brain. His eyes glowed red. The piglet turned into a huge demonic boar. The man told him to concentrate on the battle. He himself decided to follow the zombies. The huge green cauldron continued to work and digest people's bodies. Suddenly the cauldron jumped sharply above the ground. The boar stood to the side and watched this. After this, the green demon rushed forward against the frightened boar. The huge pig put his paws forward. He tried to fight off his attacking opponent. The green demon hit the boar with all his might. He grunted with displeasure after the blow. The boar stood very scared and tried to stop the opponent's attack. The green demon rushed at the frightened pig and grabbed his body with his teeth. The boar screamed in fear. He could not cope with his opponent and called a man for help. The main character was sitting on a pile of zombie bodies. He said displeasedly to the monster that he began to beg for mercy after the first meeting, face to face with his opponent. The man judiciously told the boar that he must give his best in every fight. Lee looked angrily at the huge pig and said that he should develop his Taoist spirit. The man angrily asked the monster, did he really decide that this would be the last battle? The main character demanded that the boar not be like the living dead under his feet. The huge pig shouted menacingly and loudly that he needed a brain. The boar angrily rushed at the green demon and grabbed him with its fangs. A huge piglet was able to bite off part of the green demon's head with his teeth. The main character happily thought that he would not have to interfere in the battle of his pet. The boar continued to demand the brain for itself. He prepared to attack the green demon once more. The demon's body shattered into pieces and fell to the floor. The boar continued to demand the brain for itself. The main character shouted to the huge boar named Lao Guiyi to move forward. Lee looked at the monster and said that it absorbed everything very quickly. Strength can be considered worthy. The boar flew up to the man and said that he was very scared. The guy said that the monster's intelligence had become higher. The little pig handed the man a soul-cleansing pill. The main character took the pill in his hands. The boar told him that if he took this pill, then he will feel pain and die. Every other day, during the day, a lot of people crowded around the entrance to the warehouse. Lee was holding a document in his hands. The old man bowed to the guy and said that he sent people to take control of this place and collect evidence of the crimes of the Dongfang family. The main character thanked his interlocutor. The guy was sitting on a chair. There was a cup of coffee on the table nearby. He decided to warn the old man about something. Lee took the cup in his hands. He told his grandfather not to try to repeat such experiments. The old man looked at the main character and said that he knows what needs to be done. At this time, the phone in the protagonist's pocket rang. The guy decided to pick up the phone. Lee was holding the phone in his hands. He asked his girlfriend what happened. The girl, in a frightened voice, told her friend to quickly go to the Moo family's house. Something terrible happened. In the evening in the house, a frightened girl told her father that her brother sent her to experiment on people in order to please the Dongfang family. She told Moo in a frightened voice that Mr. Lee had saved her. Otherwise, she would have died. The brother turned around and angrily told his sister to shut up. Father sat silently on the sofa and listened to everything. The man was silent. He looked at the girl with an angry and hateful gaze. In a frightened voice, with tears in her eyes, she asked her father, "Did he really know about this?" The brother explained to his sister that the father knew about everything, and even agreed. The girl asked the man why he did this. The man jumped up and said that he was doing all this for the sake of the Moo family. He demanded that the girl be proud that she would die for the sake of her family. The guy looked at the girl and said that he had good intentions. Moo angrily asked, "Did they really want to sacrifice her because she was a woman?" Unexpectedly, the man sharply swung his whip and prepared to hit the girl in the face. The girl did not expect to receive a strong blow to the face with a whip. She didn't have time to defend herself. The guy said that he sent his wife as a victim. The father ordered the servants to send the girl to the Dongfang house to make amends. Two bandits in suits appeared on the floor. The cat was watching all this from above. Shui told herself with interest that the father was sending his daughter to the house for experiments. She decided to show all this to the Taoist. The girl called the main character and said in a frightened voice that something serious had happened in his house. The girl looked at the phone and told herself that everything was ready. Shui looked down at the frightened girl. She decided to help her first. Moo felt one of the fighters put his hand on her shoulder from behind. The girl angrily shouted to the fighters that she would not allow them to humiliate her. A green glow appeared around the bandit's hand. The girl struck the guards with green lightning. They came back. The father angrily shouted to his daughter that she had really rebelled. The brother told the man that he wanted to teach his sister respect for her elders. The girl stood angrily and green lightning came from her body in all directions. Moo put her hand to the floor. She activated super strength and energy. The girl sharply waved her hand in front of her. At this time, living boards flew out of the floor. Boards in huge quantities began to open from the floor and demolish people in front of them. The guy angrily said that the girl's strength increased after meeting Mr. Lee. Moo looked at her brother angrily and said that she would definitely defeat him today. After that, the boards in the floor scattered and a green demon began to appear from there. Moo stood in the center of the room and a huge fighter appeared behind her. The brother looked angrily at his sister and said that she decided that she was the strongest. Ice began to appear on the guy's body. He told the girl that he was no longer who he was before. Moo was very surprised when she noticed that the guy had the power of ice. She said he used to have tree power. The brother split a piece of ice with his hand. He invited his sister to look at the difference between them. The guy jumped up and swung a huge ice axe. He decided to hit the girl. The ice fighter jumped down. He kicked the green monster with all his might. The frightened girl felt that she could not move. The green fighter received a strong blow. The guy landed on the floor. The green demon's body began to completely freeze. The brother swung his ice axe and said that everything was very weak. He activated the wooden spike with super strength. After that, wooden spikes flew in the direction of the frozen green fighter. The girl could not hold back the blow. Her fighter shattered, and she flew to the side. The guy stood and held the ice hammer on his back. He said that the Dongfang family could offer all this to the Moo family. The father told the girl that her strength was weak. Participating in the experiments will increase her strength and strengthen cooperation between the Moo and Dongfang families. The girl was sitting on the floor. She repeated to herself that she was a child of the Moo family, Moo thought. She told the father that he never loved her the way other fathers love their daughters. The girl remembered that no matter what success she achieved, her father always praised only her older brother. In the end, Moo only had to train and study every day. The daughter assumed that if she worked hard for the sake of the family, she could attract the attention of her father and become his pride. Moo angrily said that her brother was useless and was ready to sacrifice others for the sake of his abilities. The guy angrily asked the girl who was she insulting. The father told his son that he could then deal with his sister himself. The guy extended his hand to the girl. He said that he would freeze her and then cut off her arms and legs. This will help show the sincerity of the Moo family. At this time, suddenly someone ran up from the side and grabbed the guy by the hand. The father, his son and daughter, turned around in fear. They did not expect that someone would appear now. The main character held the guy's hand with all his strength and said that he made it on time. Moo scaredly told the main character that the guy is very strong and he should run away. The brother swung his ice sword and told the guy that he himself had come to his death. Lee put his finger carefully in front of him. He used it to stop a huge ice axe. People around were surprised. The surprised guy could not understand how the main character could stop his axe with 2 fingers. Lee silently squeezed his fingers, and the huge ice axe shattered into pieces. The main character called his girlfriend. The girl jumped from the ceiling to the floor. The main character told his girlfriend to take Moo Fei away from this place. He'll figure out the rest himself. Lee looked angrily in front of him and said that in front of him was just pathetic trash. The fighter joyfully shouted that he was one of 10,000 applicants. The guy activated an ice fall against the main character. Lee stood and held a sword in his hands. Lee put his hand forward. He used the blazing sun sword of the first form. A bright pillar of fire came from the protagonist's hand. He decided to cut the rainbow with a sword. A stream of fire cut off the surprised guy's head. He didn't have time to defend himself. The fighter's head was lying on the floor. He used an arboreal superpower called substitution. The wooden head rolled back to the body and began to grow back. The fighter looked angrily at the main character and said that the guy is not simple. Father said that with such strength, even the Dongfang family would not be able to provoke the protagonist. Moo said in amazement that the guy had become even stronger. Shui said in a joyful voice that the main character's control over spiritual energy is becoming more precise. This is thanks to her advice. The fighter looked at his opponent and said that he was very strong, but did not understand his position. The guy called fighters from the Moo clans to help him. The main character looked carefully to the side. The guy ordered the fighters to kill the main character. A green glow appeared around the warriors. The fighters lined up in a row and directed green radiation from their hands at the main character. Lee stuck the blade into the ground in front of him. He activated the blazing sun sword 0 form. The blade entered the ground and fiery swirls began around it throughout the room. The main character stood in the center of the room. A powerful firestorm scattered the fighters to all sides. The guy was surprised. He didn't understand what kind of superpower the main character was already using. The father said that he had never heard of this type of superpower. Lee pointed his hand to the side. He told his opponents that all this was the technique of immortals. The father told the son next to him that if he was not strong in defense, then he could help him. The father activated a superpower called tree thorns. He wanted to protect himself from the fiery stream. After a very strong blow, the man flew far to the side. The guy behind him caught him. The main character walked up and told the man that he still had not reached the golden core stage. His abilities are very weak. The man fell to his knees. He said that he and his son were blind, and recalled the conditions that the main character discussed with Mufei. On behalf of the clan, he offered to provide everything at double the amount. Li fell silent. He looked at the man with great interest and did not answer. The father promised the main character that they could give him the medicinal fields of the Moo clan. This will help ensure long-term cooperation between their families. Kimin was indignant. He reminded the father that he had promised to give the fields to him. The man suddenly swung his hand and hit his son in the face with all his might. The father demanded that his son immediately apologize to the main character. Kimin said angrily that he didn't need to apologize. He had one more move to finish off his opponent. The son approached his father and told him angrily that he would have to sacrifice a little of himself. The man felt a strong blow from behind. He called the Kimin to him in a weakening voice. The girl frightenedly rushed to her father. Shui stopped her and said that the battle was not over yet. Green radiation appeared around the guy's body. He told his dead father that if he had given him the Moo clan earlier, he would have enjoyed life now. Kimin, with glowing eyes, said that he was using a hidden technique of wood superpower. This technique can only be used by direct descendants. He had reached the golden core stage. Li said that he saw in front of him a tree spirit embodiment from the Kunlun Eternal Spring sect. The fighter has completely acquired a tree form. He rushed to attack his opponent. The main character turned around very quickly and was able to hit his opponent with a powerful blow. Kimin felt that his head might explode now. He didn't understand why he couldn't keep up with the main character's speed. Kimin took a fighting stance and prepared to run towards the main character. Li jumped up. He held the sword in his hands and the fighter prepared to fight back. The main character waved his sword in all directions. The wooden monster repeated to himself the words about murder. Kimin looked angrily at the guy and shouted that he would now cut him apart. The fighter attacked the guy with an ice spear. The main character managed to jump to the side. Kimin was very surprised. He realized that his opponent had become even faster. Li put his blade in front of him. The main character responded by attacking the fighter with the sword of the bright moon. Li ran up close to his opponent and used a mountain ringing against him. The main character was able to pierce a wooden monster right through with an ice sword. Kimin was amazed. He couldn't figure out why he took damage from the ice. The main character waved his hand and used the bright moon and adding sparkle. His opponent was shattered into pieces. The main character angrily told the fighter that he was just trash who was forcibly merged with power. Moo said in surprise that she saw the absolute suppression of the strong in front of her. Shui slyly answered her interlocutor that she had not seen the main character before. Shui ran up to the main character and said that general cultivation could speed up the process. Moo was running at the side. The main character looked at the girl and said that from now on the MU clan belongs to them. The interlocutor bowed to him.